We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Peter Jones in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello, and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome back those four most experienced male competitors of the game. And we're going to ask them to speak as usual, without hesitation, without deviation, and without repetition. And the first subject that dear Mister has thought of for this show is making a spectacular entrance, and who better to do it than our own Kenneth Williams. So, Kenneth, will you start with that subject? 60 seconds, starting now.
It's appropriate I've been asked to speak on this subject for 60 seconds because I have made some spectacular entrances in my time. One of them consisted of a sort of harness apparatus which went round my crutch, and I was lowered onto the stage as an angel. Well, the place went mad. They clapped, they cheered, they threw things. Nice, of course, nothing uncomplimentary, or discomplimentary, or whatever the word is.
And Clement Freud has challenged you.
Good evening. Repetition.
Of what?
They clap, they cheer, they...
Yes, you let it go quite a long time, didn't you?
Yes,
You
I wanted to
challenged
hear what
actually on
else
the
was
clamour,
coming.
when they said disclamour and clamour.
No, I wanted to hear what else was coming.
All right, we do usually let the theys go by, but you came in on it, and as you did say they 3 times, we have to give you a correct challenge, a point for that. You take over the subject, Clement, and there are 26 seconds left, starting now.
One of the most exciting ways of making a spectacular entrance is to throw in your clothes one after the other prior to taking the stage. Your shoe is immediately followed by your sock, and then shirt, pant, vest, hat, tie, collar, jacket, shoe.
And Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of shoe, actually. It kicked off with the shoe, if you know what I mean.
Yes, but if he hadn't paused, I think he might have got away with it, actually. Derek, a correct challenge, a point to you and the subject, with 3 seconds to go, making a spectacular entrance, starting now.
I once made the most spectacular entrance when I was playing a fairy.
Well, as you know, the whistle tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that particular moment gains an extra point. Derek Nimmo getting in with 3 seconds to go achieved that, so he has a lead at the end of that round. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is my feelings. Very apt subject for you at any time, and would you talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
My feelings are very easily hurt. Only the other two...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation's not true. He's tough as nails.
Well, this is one of those impossible situations where I refuse to have to judge and make a
Hard as
personal,
old boots he is.
personal judgment on someone's
Put it in the
personality or
audience.
character. So I do put it to the audience. I would like you to decide whether you think that Derek's challenge is justified and that Clement Freud's feelings are as hard as old boots. And if you agree with Derek's challenge, will you cheer? And if you disagree, will you boo? And will you all do it together now? Clement, they love you today. So they're with you. They don't think you're as hard as old boots. You have my feelings. 55 seconds left, starting now.
For instance, when a nonconformist bishop came up to me and said, what is the difference between...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Well, you can't have a nonconformist bishop. Deviation.
He said he was a nonconformist
You
bishop.
didn't say that. So when a nonconformist bishop came
Yes,
up-
you didn't establish that he said that. You did actually say, when a nonconformist bishop came up to me. Don't look as if you're being slighted. I think it was a good challenge.
Did you want me to demand proof of his identity? I mean, it seems...
No, it's a great meal of one-upmanship, and I'm getting sort of all tense about it because it's going to be all 4 against the chairman in a minute, I know. I'll give Derek the subject now for a correct challenge, and there are 49 seconds left. My feelings, Derek, starting now.
My feelings cannot be hurt. I am as tough as old boots, unlike old Grandpa Freud over there, who is a very tender petal indeed. And those of us who look at him tonight can see him with that wonderful smile.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Hesitation.
I would agree, Peter. Yes.
So would I. Absolutely right. Jolly good decision.
So Peter's in, and he has 36.5 seconds on my feelings, starting now.
My feelings include those marvellous tingling ones when one dives into ice-cold water from a very high board. And also, of course, the wafting of the sun-drenched air as you stand on the rock after this marvellous immersion in the Mediterranean.
A sort of a hesitation in the middle of the little laugh.
No, it was lovely. It was going beautiful.
Oh, no, I don't think he hesitated.
You
I think he
Oh, why?
deviated on his sun-waft air or whatever it was.
Yes, quite. I thought that
All that
wasn't the
gentle
happiest
wafting
choice
of
of
sun,
word,
it was
but
nice.
I agree.
in the circumstances of playing the game and everything,
quite
the
poetic. I
tension
thought you
that there is.
waxed lyrical, I did. I was quite impressed by you.
So, thank
Will
you.
you two shut up and let's get on with the game?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
pardon me
disagree
for
with
listening.
Derek's challenge.
Nice way to talk to somebody who's come all the way from Great Portland Street.
Peter, I disagree with the challenge of hesitation, so you keep the subject to another point and you have 20 seconds left, starting now.
Then there is the pain of the pebbles.
And Derek Nimmo challenged then.
Well, then there is. I didn't care for it, Terence.
Didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
No.
So what are you challenging for?
Well, I wasn't
Deviation.
catering
No,
to
I
him.
would have given you hesitation there, but
Would
not
you?
deviation.
All right, no.
So Peter has another point, and he keeps the subject, and there are 17 seconds. My feelings starting now.
Pain of the pebbles as they bite into the soles of your feet, which can be really extremely unpleasant.
And Derek Nimmo has challenged it.
Repetition of and hesitation in the middle. Must have won that
On
time.
either score, I will give it to you, Derek, and you have 9 seconds on my feelings starting now.
My feelings too can be aroused by the sunshine and the sea and the cool, fresh air of a lovely spring day in this beautiful country of ours. We should be proud of it.
So, Derek Nimmo not only talked about feelings, but he demonstrated them to the applause of the audience and increased his lead at the end of that round. And now we have a very simple subject, so just concentrate while I read it out to you. The subject actually is for Peter Jones to begin with, probably because his name is Jones and it sounds Welsh. And the subject is a clan fer pilgwyn gil go gerik irindrob willanticilio go go gach. I've just been handed a £5 note by Ian Mester because he bet me that I wouldn't be able to say it. All the
I
Welsh
can't
people are
write
now
it down.
phoning in and saying I haven't said it. Well, clan fer pilgwyn gil go gerik irindrob willanticilio go go gach.
But it's unfair because it's not in English. I mean, this is an English program.
Well, all right, talk about it. 60 seconds starting now.
And I tri pedwar punt chwech mathai clichai abadabe. That was the first word of Welsh that I ever heard as I was standing on the railway station of this rather nondescript little town with the extraordinary name that Nicholas has made a very good stab at pronouncing. Now, I was on the Cambrian Railway initially before I changed trains, and there...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of railway.
Yes.
Railway station in Cambridge.
Yes,
Oh, most unworthy.
but I'm
Oh, I
afraid
was getting
accurate.
quite interested in what he was doing on this railway station. Can't he give us a bit more?
Well, if
Well,
you'll sort of
he
repeat
could give you a
something
lot more, but I think we'll have to hear from Derek because it was a correct challenge. Derek, 33 seconds on clan fer pilgwyn gil go gerik irindrob willanticilio go go gach. With you now.
Thank you very much for giving me the subject of the clan fair and lots of other things in the go-go-go at the end, which I did think it's a very nice one to get because it does produce quite the longest railway ticket in the British Isles and something that people come all...
Clement Freud has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was. I suppose repeating a thing like that was hesitation as well. Clement, I agree with the... Well, he hesitated to
That's
repeat
very
it,
interesting new
yes.
rule.
There was
If you
a-
repeat something, it's hesitation. I must remember that. I mean, I'll write it down.
The way you repeated it was Oh, shut up. Let's get on. Clement, I agree with your challenge, and you have 21 seconds on clan fer pilgwyn... Oh, I've got to start again. Clan fer pilgwyn gil go gerik irindrob willanticilio go go gach. I get quicker every time. Have you noticed that? Mike, do you know what it means?
It means little church by the stream near the house, not far from the brook, over the hill.
Mary Willow
up the
comes in
creek.
somewhere.
That
Mary
sort of
Willow,
thing.
little church. Yes, well done. But you
That
weren't
sort
going.
of
I hadn't said no, actually. There are 21 seconds on that subject, Clement, with you, starting now.
This almost unpronounceable Welsh village means little house by the brook, near the stream, not far from a widow, and the first time I ever went to Anglesey.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition.
What?
Well, he's just told us that a moment ago. He did. It was terribly boring the first time, and it's even worse the second.
But unfortunately, Peter, the clock wasn't actually going the first time.
Well, that's not my fault if you're not.
It wasn't accurate, you know.
It wasn't?
No.
No, I know he got the house in the wrong place. It's the other side of the...
Well, actually, Peter, as Derek challenged you, and his first challenge I wouldn't allow, he did not actually repeat himself. But you could have had him for deviation. But I'm afraid you didn't, so Clement gets a point for that. There are 11 seconds on that place, Clement, starting now.
So I wrote to the Automobile Association and said, how is it that I get there? And received a plan.
Peter Jones has challenged.
It's a railway station. You go by rail. There's no point in writing to the Automobile Association.
Well, you could write to the Automobile Association. They could give you instructions.
Well, you could write to the Anti-Vivisection Society if you wanted.
I know you could, and you wouldn't be deviating from the subject on the card.
Of course you would. It's absolute rubbish.
No, you could write to anybody.
Automobile Association is the first thing he thought of because he's parked his car on a yellow line and he knows he's in trouble.
But the Automobile Association might repair. I don't think he was deviating from the subject on the card, which is the rule of the game. He has 5 seconds on Clanfair, Pilgwyn, Gilgo, Gericir, Indob, Lanticilio, Go, Go, Gok. Starting now.
Proceed along the A41 in the direction of Watford.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of A, and A.
A clever challenge and a wicked one. Give him a point for a wicked challenge. Leave the subject with Clement Freud, who continues with 2.5 seconds to go, starting now.
Hemel Hempstead.
Well, at the end of that round, the situation is that Clement Freud got quite a few points on Clanfair, Pilgwyn, Gilgo, Gericir, Indrod, Lanticilio, Go, Go, Gok. And he increased his position. He's now equal in the lead with Derek Nimmo. They're both ahead of Peter Jones, who's in quite a good second position, and Kenneth Williams is in third position, not having yet scored. But he's been heard to good effect. Derek Nimmo, your turn to begin. The subject is Greece. Can you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
There's something I don't awfully like on plates, but I do like when I find it in the Mediterranean. The wine dark sea, as I sail across it in my kaike with 2 bronze sailors at the prow. I know, I'm a big floating.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Either repetition of ha ha ha. Or hesitation.
Very good. All these bronze sailors. Where'd you get them?
What is your challenge of ha ha ha? I'm not going to allow it.
Deviation.
No, disgraceful.
Deviation
No
from
right
normal
to criticize the chairman. You can't
he
criticize
was,
the chair like
no,
that.
he was speaking while he was laughing. I don't think he
that's
stopped
all
when
right.
ha ha ha. No.
That's good, is it?
No, it may be not good, it may be bad, it may be good, it may be anything, but he kept going. He didn't hesitate, so he keeps the subject. There are 35 seconds on Greece, Derek, starting now.
Yes, I really do like their food enormously. There's stuffed peppers and ditto aubergines, and lovely little vine leaves have got things thrust into the middle of them in a similar way to the one...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
The things in the middle are wrapped with vine leaves. I mean, you don't get a vine leaf and stuff something in the middle.
No, that's a very good challenge, Clement. I agree with it. And you have 25.5 seconds on
Depends
Greece,
how you make
starting
them.
now.
In the...
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Hesitation didn't start, did it?
And Derek, the reason he didn't start is because, as I was saying, you start now, you actually spoke, which inhibited his to start.
It was inhibited.
And actually, it was only half a second, because I had said 25.5 seconds, and Ian has stopped the clock, and it is exactly 25 seconds left. So I disagree with that challenge, and Greece is still with you, Clement, starting now.
In the main square in Athens, which is the capital of Greece, there stands a hotel called the GB, or Grand Britannia, where most of the ambassadors, crowned heads, nobility of European and foreign capitals, countries, continents, and dominions stay with their...
Clement Williams has challenged.
Deviation. He's just going on listing all these places to pad it all out so he can win. I mean, it's nothing to do with Greece going on about the dominions and all these other places.
No, the dominions
it's
is very
deviation,
devious.
you know
Yes,
it.
there's very
and
few
therefore
left,
I
isn't there?
should take the subject over.
Well said, Kenneth. And it is obvious that the audience agree, so you have 8.5 seconds on Greece starting now.
I arrived there on a sunny afternoon and was terribly high on this ouzo, which I didn't know about, but apparently is a very strong aperitif.
So Kenneth Williams got in then just before the whistle kept going till the whistle went, gained 2 points, and he's still in 4th place. But, and oh, by the way, the lead is still held jointly by Derek Nimmo and Clement Freud, and Kenneth Williams, your turn to begin. The subject, Horatio Bottomley. Would you talk about him for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, I only know what everyone else does about him. He was brought up, I believe, in the East End and started this paper.
Derek Nimmo's challenged.
Deviation, I don't know that. Everybody else knows that. I don't.
It doesn't matter whether you know it or not. It's a figure of speech which he used in starting his talk on Horatio Bottomley. I consider that challenge had no connection, so he gets a point for a wrong challenge. He keeps the subject, and there are 53.5 seconds left. Horatio Bottomley starting now.
Well, he began this newspaper and then formed various companies and was accused of fraud, and he had this trial and he got off, and then he became an MP, and then he applied for children.
Clement Freud challenged.
That's 5 ands.
Yes, it was 5 ands.
Well, if you're going to criticise people's repetition of parts of speech, it's going to be ludicrous.
It's going to be very difficult, but don't say and anymore, and we won't charge anything, and keep going, Kenneth, on Horatio Bottomley. 40 seconds, starting now.
Well, there isn't much more you can say about Bottomley.
Clement Freud is challenged.
And shut up.
Which is what you usually say, Kenneth. I thought his challenge was going to be there's an awful lot more you can say about him. So, what is your real challenge, Clement?
Just that.
Well, that's not a correct challenge within the game, so Kenneth keeps the subject, and there are 37.5 seconds starting now.
He was indicted at the Old Bailey on charges of embezzlement and sent to prison. He came out...
Peter Jones has challenged. Repetition of and.
Was it?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't allow it when Clement did it. I wouldn't allow it when Derry did it. I can't allow an and when Peter Jones does it. You've got the subject still. And there are 27 seconds on Horatio Bottomley with you, Kenneth, starting now.
The man had run all these incredibly vast business institutions and thousands of pounds.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of business.
Yes, you did mention business before.
I didn't.
Did he say business before, audience?
Of course I didn't.
You're partisan, aren't you? They want you to stay. All right! Don't make it a rabble! Who are you, rent-a-crowd? All right, the audience decided they want you to keep this subject, whatever happens, through to the bitter end. You're on your Horatio Bottomley, and there are 22 seconds left, starting now.
So from this great wealth, this position of influence and prestige, he was reduced to a position which, well, no describe.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of position.
Yes, you did have too many
Well, he had
positions.
so many positions. You see.
Derek, this time I can't find any way to leave it with Kenneth, and you have 12 seconds on Horatio Bottomley, starting now.
He was...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation, very slow off the mark.
I agree, absolutely, I agree. I absolutely endorse that.
Shut up, Kenneth. I don't think he was slow off the mark. And I wouldn't allow it when he did attempt it a while ago. So, Derek, you keep the subject, and there are 10 seconds on Horatio Bottomley starting.
Horatio Bottomley was educated at Harlow School, Old Marston in Oxfordshire.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
This is not the Horatio Bottomley we're discussing. This old gag of his of pretending he knows one and making it all up.
We can't prove he doesn't know an Horatio Bottomley went to this school in Harlesden.
And he can't prove he does.
No.
Or
And
did.
so we're in the impossible situation of having to play it with Derek Nimmo's weighing because he hasn't deviated from the subject on the card, which is Horatio Bottomley.
No, you said it had to be proved. In fact, when you said that
And you
he
can
said
either
the night
prove
he
it or
spent...
disprove it. So
You
he
said
keeps the
you-
subject,
you
and there are
said he
6.5
couldn't have spent
seconds
the night in
with you,
jail
Derek Nimmo,
last
on
night.
Horatio Bottomley starting
The
now.
Horatio Bottomley that I'm talking about, his real name was Nelson Topman, but to be very funny, they called him Horatio Bottomley, which made all the children laugh enormously.
Well, at the end of that round, Derek Nimmo was speaking with the whistle when gained the extra point. He increased his position. He's now in the lead ahead of Clement Freud, but Kenneth Williams has leapt forward from 4th to 3rd place ahead of Peter Jones. And Clement Freud, you begin the next round, and the subject, very aptly, after all that's just gone before, is bother.
Who?
Can you talk on bother? For 60 seconds, starting now.
My first job in the British Broadcasting Corporation was to listen to tapes of other performances and plays, all sorts of records, tapes, and delete such filth as the word bother so that the things would become suitable for all family listening. And bother played a very important part in my life as a result. Hell and damn in those days were perfectly acceptable words, but not bother. I remember particularly...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Well, hesitating tremendously slowly. Don't you
I don't think he was. I think he was
going very
completely
slow.
devious.
Don't you
Because
think
if what he's talking
deviation,
about, the days and when the BBC wouldn't allow bother, they certainly wouldn't have allowed damn and hell. But you didn't challenge on that. So
I don't want to hurt his feelings. I know how sensitive he is about this.
So 30 seconds still with you, Clement, on bother, starting now.
My children, when I asked them whether they knew Derek Nimmo, said, oh yes, he appears in a program called Oh Bother. And when I explained that actually it should have been Brother, they said, that isn't the man I meant. I thought it was Peter Jones. No. I said no twice.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
He condemned himself.
He condemned himself 15 seconds, or 14 and a half to be accurate, on bother, with you, Derek, starting now.
If I get a great big hammer in my hand and belt it on top of my thumb, I go, oh, bother. And pish, I say sometimes if I'm not very careful, and occasionally something even worse than that. And I put my hand over my mouth.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
5 ands.
Well, as Kenneth, I would not allow it against you from all the other three. I've obviously got to allow you to have it against them, haven't I?
No, it was just a trick. I was just trying. I didn't really mean it.
Well, I think that I've been given and your way all the time, so we have 4 seconds on you with bother, starting now.
It's when you're irritated by anything in this world, you tend to regard...
Well, at the end of that round, Kenneth Williams moved forward. He's 1 point behind Clement Freud, but Clement is still about 5 points behind our leader, who is still Derek Nimmo. And Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject is, when I was very small. Will you talk on that for 1 minute, starting now?
When I was very small, everything around looked enormous by comparison, and tabletops appeared to be just a few inches above my head as I tottered about playing with a ball or rattle or...
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
I don't wish to know that. Hesitation.
Yes. A strange place to hesitate, wasn't it? 44 seconds with you, Derek, on when I was very small, starting now.
When I was very small, I had a Wendy house, which was in my garden. I used to retire there with all sorts of chums, and we play games like hospitals and nurses and things. And it was quite near a railway line. We used to pop out and look at the puffer trains going by. I also had a teddy bear called Bobby. And this never left my side until I was called up and had to become a soldier, and the sergeant major wouldn't let me take it with him. But I spent a very happy childhood because I was very small. In fact, so tiny was I that people used to look at me in the street and say, what a ne'er-do-well, nothing, tiny creature you are.
Clement for his challenge.
So I quite accept
Repetition of tiny.
Repetition of tiny. Very good, very good.
Yes, you were a bit too tiny, I'm afraid. And so Clement spotted it, and he has the subject now, and there are 8.5 seconds on when I was very small, Clement, starting now.
When I was very small, I had a particularly good joke, which was to ask people, why do hummingbirds hum? And the answer was, because they don't know the words.
Just got his joke in before the whistle went, speaking at that particular moment, gained him the extra point, but I'm afraid he didn't manage to catch up on Derek Nimmo, and as we have no more time, I must give you the final score. Peter Jones, in spite of a great flurry at 1 point, unfortunately finished in 4th place, a little way behind Kenneth Williams, who with magnificent style and panache, saying and, with a great help from the others, came in 3rd place, just 3 points behind Clement Freud, but he was 4 behind this week's winner, Derek Nimmo. We do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Just a Minute, and we hope you're going to enjoy the show. And once again, I'm going to ask our four keen competitors of the game if they can speak for just 1 minute on some unlikely subject that I will give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject which is on the card in front of me. And let us begin the show this week with that most exuberant of performers, Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, the subject is my foibles. Can you talk to us about them for 60 seconds, starting now?
They are manifold, but among them is a desperate desire to burst into lyricism at the drop of a hat. This all began when I was on a bullock cart on my way to Dawlish, where I was taken by my godmother in my youth. And one of the lyrics that I was prone to recite was, there was no man of Madrid who went to an auction to bid, and the first thing they showed was an ancient commode. What ho, when they lifted... No, perhaps I don't. With that, but another...
Derek Nimmo has challenged you. Derek, what is the basis of your challenge?
A justifiable hesitation.
A very unjustifiable challenge. I don't think he hesitated. He was doing very well. So as I disagree with your challenge, Derek, Kenneth gets a point for a wrong challenge and keeps the subject, and he has 34 seconds left. My foibles, Kenneth, starting now.
Another which springs to mind is there was a young lady kneeling who walked upside down on the ceiling, and another said rose.
Derek,
and that, I suppose,
Nimmo,
is a very peculiar feeling.
Derek challenged you as you started your
What
second
for?
round.
A repetition of supposes, repetition of Young's and various other ones.
Yes.
They were much the same lyric with a dirtier ending.
What was the repetition?
What is the actual repetition?
Well, Young was repeated.
Yes, the word young, I'm afraid, was
And
repeated, because the other...
There wasn't young. There was an old man of Madrid, and that was a young lady from Ealing, dear. There was no repetition
yes,
of young.
Right, all right, you've justified yourself, Kenneth. You have another point, and you have 31 seconds. 31 seconds starting now.
Another one of my foibles is to avoid the dirty crack. I mean, in the sense of pavement or in the sense of what comes out of people's mouths. Both are liable to end up...
Peter Jones a challenge this time.
Hesitation.
He stumbled. Is a stumble a hesitation? Yes,
Oh, it
I
has
think
been
it
the
is.
last
Yes,
6
of
years.
course. He actually repeated sense, but nobody spotted that one. There are 20
I
seconds.
did, but I don't want to talk about foibles.
Nice to hear from you, Sheila. There are 20 seconds left for you, Peter Jones, because I
Especially
agree with your
mine.
challenge, and therefore you gain a point in the subject starting now.
Well, as I interpret the subject, we're supposed to talk about your foibles. Now, I don't know very much about them. I know you have...
Derek Nimmo has challenged you.
Well, deviation, if he doesn't know anything about them, he can't talk about them.
That's never stopped you.
Exactly, Peter. In this game, you have to try. You have to keep going, even if you don't know a great deal about it. Peter, you have a point for a wrong challenge. You keep the subject in 13 seconds on my foibles starting now.
Now, I know he has one foible, which involves always going to the wrong studio to do broadcasts. Did, in fact...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation is not true. It's the first time, to my knowledge, he's ever gone to the wrong studio.
Well, I'm in a difficult
He said
situation. I
always.
must explain to our audience and to our listeners that today I did go to the wrong studio for this recording. But, of course, I must disagree with Peter Jones. I don't always go to the wrong studio. I must also disagree
Well,
with...
that's a matter of opinion.
And I must disagree with Derek's challenge because he says, as far as he knows, this is the only time. Well, I must be truthful and say I have been before to the wrong studio. So what do I do? Shall I let the audience be the judge and mess it up? Audience, if you agree with Derek's challenge that I've only been to the wrong studio once, will you cheer? If you agree with with Peter Jones that I always go to the wrong studio, will you boo? And will you all do it together? No. Oh, I'm going! They think I always go to the wrong studio. You think I'm always in the wrong studio? Well, bad luck on you next time if I'm in. Anyway, you agree with Peter Jones. You're right. You're against the chairman as well as the panel. My goodness, all right,
I'm not
Peter.
against
you have a.
Nick.
Oh, Sheila. Thank you. Peter, you have another point and 5 seconds on my foibles starting now.
I know another foible you have, which I don't want to...
Sheila Hancock has challenged.
Hesitation?
Yes, Sheila, you've got in just before the whistle. There are 2 seconds on my foibles, Sheila, starting now.
I find it very embarrassing to talk about.
Well, as you know, whoever's speaking when the whistle goes, which is blown most delicately and exquisitely by Ian Messiter, who thought of the game, gets an extra point. And on this occasion, it was Sheila, who was in second place with Kenneth Williams, behind Peter Jones in the lead, and Derek has yet to score, and Sheila will begin the next round, and the subject is excuses. Sheila, will you talk on that subject for 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
Excuses are something that I used to make when I was younger, but I've ceased to make now I'm aged, because I think if people can't accept me as I am, well, it's their bad luck. If I'm late, I just say I'm late. I don't make up any reason. I remember my very first excuse was when I was 3 years old and I decided to leave home. And my parents ran a pub and I packed my attaché case with all my belongings and walked out through the pub. There was dead silence because everybody was rather anxious. And 5 minutes later I came back shamefacedly and said I forgot my gloves, which of course was just an excuse to get back. However, since then, as I say, I've changed.
Peter Jones is challenged.
A repetition of pub.
Oh.
I did a long time ago, but I thought it better to let the story
Yes,
unwind.
It's too long ago. He's past it. You should have made it when it happened.
There's no law about
There's
when
the
you
law.
can
You must make it when
those.
it happens. You can't wait for all that length of time. That's a disgrace. Sheila Hancock was well underway. You did a most ungallant thing.
No, I think he was...
Most ungallant. Either way, to the time or shut up.
In spite of the way you're playing on the audience, I disagree. I think he was actually being gallant because he allowed Sheila to keep going so that we heard something from Sheila about her life, which we found very touching and interesting. And then he decided to challenge, and so I award him a point for a correct challenge. And he has the subject with 17 seconds left. Excuses, Peter, starting now.
I've known actors and writers who are more inventive in making excuses than they are in their work. One of the great secrets about excuses is to only make one at a time. If you fail to turn up for some function and you explain that you were ill, that your uncle died, that...
Peter Jones is speaking when the whistle went, and he gained that bonus point, which means he's increased his lead at the end of that round. He now has 5 points. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round, please? The subject, training a performing flea. I don't know whether Ian Messiter thought of the subject because he feels you might have some personal experience, but we'll soon find out as you start talking for 60 seconds now.
Well, training a performing flea is a really frightfully difficult thing to do because you have to establish a breeding ground for your fleas, and one tends to use one's friends' ears so you can send them away with a flea in one so they can grow and mature and become nicely rounded fleas. An extraordinary thing is a flea. You can't tell a he from a she, but he can and she can whoopee, which is a very nice thing to recite when you're actually performing with your fleas.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
He's reciting limericks again, like Kenneth was. Nothing to do with how to train a performing
Incorrect
flea.
challenge. He wasn't reciting limericks before, so how can he recite them again?
No, you were.
Kenneth Williams. Thank you very much, Kenneth. We enjoyed it, but I'm actually the chairman who has to make the decisions. He's not being repetitious on the subject. He's still talking about training performing fleas. So, Derek, you have a point for an incorrect challenge and 30 seconds left, starting now.
The equestrian flea is particularly desirable. As you all know, big fleas have little ditto on their backs to ride them, and little similar have something rather different, and so on ad infinitum.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition of little.
Yes, that is correct. And you have 19 seconds left to start talking on training a performing flea, starting now.
I know a little about how to train a performing flea because I was once on a television program with a man who did it for a living. And it was interesting, at lunchtime, he rolled his left sleeve up and gave his fleas a meal off his arm.
Kenneth Williams is
It's just
challenged.
I'm come here to listen to a load of filth like this. Disgusting. It's supposed to be family entertainment. Listen to people feeding fleas.
Well, you couldn't be more family-minded than giving your own flesh to your fleas, could you?
Just
So, Kenneth, what is your challenge?
deviation.
When he wants an evening of filth, he normally stays at home.
Well, he wasn't being devious from the subject, I'm afraid, Kenneth, so he gets another point and 5 seconds left, Peter, starting now.
And then he fastened
Derek
this...
Nimmo challenged.
a long hesitation.
Well, not a long one, but it was a hesitation.
It wasn't a hesitation at all.
Yes.
No.
Yes, it
No,
was.
it wasn't. I was waiting for the applause to die down.
You almost deserve a bonus point for that remark, I think, Peter. But I'll resist the temptation as you're in the lead and say Derek has a point for a correct challenge and 3 seconds left on training and performing Flea. Derek, starting now.
When you're training performing fleas, you have to start from scratch. This is terribly important.
At the end of that round, Derek Nimmo has increased his position, so he is now in second place, having overtaken Sheila and Kenneth. But Peter Jones is very definitely still in the lead. And Peter, we'd like you to begin the next round. And the subject is being virtuous. That's made you look rather nonplussed. But would you talk on it now for 60 seconds, starting now?
What a wonderful subject. I feel very gratified that I have been invited by the British Broadcasting Corporation to address the English-speaking world on this great theme. It's an old-fashioned word, and there's, I've got
Sheila.
Oh, it's very unfair hesitation.
I'm not surprised
Very
after the things he was saying. He couldn't keep up his, I don't suppose, virtuosity. No, he wouldn't
I
keep up.
don't think you should allow the challenge, really.
I think I should, because I think, when Peter starts talking about being virtuous, he slowly grinds to a halt. And so, Sheila, we'll see how you do with the subject. You have a point for a correct challenge, and 37.5 seconds starting now.
Being virtuous usually means being chaste and kind and charitable.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Doesn't mean being chased. I've been chasing her for years.
Well, I'm virtuous. I haven't risen.
Well, this means whether she was saying chaste or chaste.
Yes, I was saying chaste.
Chaste with a T or chaste
Oh,
without
I
a
see.
T.
I'm sorry.
And I think she had the T in her chaste. So you have 29 seconds left and another point, Sheila, and you begin on being virtuous starting now.
However, nowadays it is very difficult to find those qualities in people because, unfortunately...
To Kenneth Williams.
It's not difficult at all. She's looking right at me.
You can't allow that. You can't allow that.
I'll put it to the audience if you like.
Ask them if I'm virtuous. Ask them to cheer if I am.
They don't know him as well as I do.
Knowing him as well as Sheila Hancock, if you think that Kenneth Williams is virtuous, would you cheer? And if you think he's not virtuous, will you boo? And we'll all do it together now. You brought that one on yourself, Kenneth Williams. They booed your...
You're a lot of other things. You're a lot of other lovely things, but just not virtuous.
I don't know what the result is, but Sheila keeps the subject. We're having a bit of fun then. There are 24 seconds now, starting now.
However, children usually have this quality.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
Children are not notorious for their virtue. They're notorious, in fact, for their cruelty. It's often been remarked upon by psychologists, so it's completely...
Yes, I would
remark.
agree, if we're going to be rather intellectual
It depends
about
what you
this,
say
that
virtuous.
so often children do not have their virtues. Often we try to grow them up.
Innocence they may have, but not virtue.
Now you've proved you're not
this
virtuous.
blethering,
All right,
blethering,
Kenneth.
blethering.
We're
What do
giving
you
you the
get on?
subject and 20 seconds on being virtuous, starting now.
This is something I practice daily, and it's largely the result of self-discipline. Let us not kid ourselves. Breathe there a man with soul so dead who never to himself hath said, this is my native land, whose heart is there within him.
Sheila Hancock was challenged.
It's deviation. He's talking a load of rubbish.
Let us go back to Sheila with being virtuous and 6 seconds to go, starting now.
I have come to the conclusion that being virtuous is very difficult to define.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of difficult.
Yes, she did say something was difficult before. So, Derek, you have a point in 2 seconds on being virtuous, starting now.
When man grows virtuous in their own age, their only sacrifice to God
Sheila Hancock has challenged.
is the devil's leaning.
You stuttered. You stuttered.
Sheila, have you pressed your buzzer before the whistle?
Yes, he stuttered. He stuttered.
Yes, he definitely did.
You did?
So what's your challenge? What's your challenge, Sheila?
Stutter, hesitation.
Yes, I think it was absolute rubbish he was talking. You've got
Yes.
another point. You've got half a second, Sheila. Hang on. Being virtuous, starting now.
Hey? Oh.
You'll never guess what's happened at the end of that round.
I'm winning.
Yes. Being Virtuous has taken Sheila into the lead, 2 points ahead of Peter Jones, who is 3 points ahead of Derek, and is 1 point ahead of Kenneth. And the subject is now... But you're going to hear from Kenneth Williams now. It's his turn to start. And the subject is Wolfgang, Amadeus, Chrysostom, Mozart. 60 seconds starting now.
Yes, he was born in Austria. The place, I believe, was Salzburg, and was trundled around Europe by his dad on the sort of infant prodigy, you might call him, and the harpsichord. And they had digs in Ebury Street, where this Mrs. Clutton was the landlady. In fact, she said after hearing him once, "Oh, if music be the food of love, play on."
Sheila Hancock has jumped.
Wasn't that Shakespeare?
Yes, Shakespeare said it, but Mrs. Clutton might have repeated Shakespeare. So, Kenneth Williams, you didn't deviate from the subject, and you have 41 seconds left, starting now.
In fact, when he played her, his clarinet quintet, she said, "Oh, I could die," and did. She expired in the arms of the St. John's ambulance that were there, actually, very providently at the time.
Derek Nimmo has jumped.
Deviation. St. John's ambulance were not found in the 18th century.
No. So Derek has a correct challenge, and 30 seconds on Wolfgang, Amadeus, Chrysostom, Mozart, starting now.
But dear Mrs. Clutton, she did look after him terribly well. I remember one time when his mother came to visit him, she bought him this lovely steak and some asparagus. And when Mr. Mozart returned his things, his landlady said, "I've cooked the meat and I've put the bluebells in water."
You've been challenged by Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
When?
In the middle of that last...
I don't remember. It was all over.
He didn't go on. He was laughing and not going on.
You're quite right, he was. He's quite right. Peter Jones, you have a subject and you have 14 seconds left, starting now.
Actually, he was only 6 when he lived in Ebury Street.
Derek Nimmo's challenged.
Deviation's not true.
Well, I don't know how old he was when he was in Ebury Street.
It wasn't 6.
Wasn't 6?
No.
All right, then you got the subject.
Do you know how old he was?
9.
9.
He was 9.
Dated in the Clapham biography.
Yes, he was 9, actually. He was 9. I know when you read it, you read the 6 upside down, and in the 9 upside down, I thought it was 6, Peter, but I'm very sorry, it was actually 9. So there are 11 seconds with you on the subject. Derek, starting now.
Now picture the scene in Vienna in the 18th century. Suddenly, music moves from Italy to that noble city there in Austria under the Habsburgs, and suddenly there are people like Haydn and...
Dear Ambassador, I wish you'd think of some easier subjects for them, and then I wouldn't have such difficult problems on decisions. Sheila Hancock's still in the lead, 1 ahead of Peter, who's crept up a little on her now. Derek's creeping up as well, and Kenneth's creeping. They're all creeping. And Sheila, we're back with you, and the subject, very apt for this show, laughter. Would you talk on the subject of laughter for 60 seconds, starting now?
This is one of the joys of my life, and I hope everybody else's. I used to think when people said to me, "Isn't it nice to make people laugh?" that it was a bit of a waste of time, until just recently when I needed a bit of cheering up and I suddenly realised the value of laughter. It's a marvellously exhilarating, letting out feeling to let go, and I recommend it to all of you. However, in our profession, it can be a disadvantage, as, for instance, it can cause you to hesitate on this show. Or if you're working, as I did, for 18 months in a review with Kenneth Williams, and he is apt to say the odd obscenity under his breath to you, it is apt to make you uncontrollable and unable to continue with your part. And unfortunately, I always continue laughing long after everybody else.
Derek Nimmo's had the temerity to challenge you.
I'm so sorry, a repetition of continue.
Of any repetition?
Continue, I beg your pardon.
Of what? Of what?
Continue was the word that was repeated.
Yes, she did repeat it. What a pity, because she
And
only
act, she
had
repeated
12
as well,
seconds
one
left,
other
and she was
one,
doing so well on laughter and moving us, I thought.
Oh, terribly. I let her go on.
I was
quite a
about
while,
to tell a
really.
story about you,
Oh, well, I withdraw then.
No. You made your challenge, Derek. You're entitled to a point for a correct challenge, and you have 12 seconds left on laughter, starting now.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult to describe noise made by this subject because you can't go ha, you have to go he afterwards, otherwise it'd be repetitions. And then sometimes, you know, when's one standing by lamppost?
Sheila Hancock has challenged.
When's one standing by lamppost? Hesitation or deviation?
Well, I think last time, because I couldn't hear him, I had to be harsh with him. On this occasion, I will give him the benefit of the doubt, and I won't be harsh, and leave the subject with him with 2 seconds left on laughter. Derek, starting now.
Throw your great belly back in the seat and let out great guffaw into the air.
On that occasion, Derek Nimmo was speaking when the whistle went, so he gained the extra point, and he's now gone to the lead. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round, please? Postcards. 60 seconds starting now.
Oh, I love getting them. I had an uncle who used to collect postcards, and when he went on his holidays, he sent them from wherever he happened to be, irrespective of where they actually originated from, which was rather confusing. The first joke I ever heard was on a postcard. I remember repeating it when I was about 9. It was a picture of a girl standing near a piano, and a man with a clergyman's collar was playing it, and another person was making an announcement, and the announcement ran, "And now Miss Stingo will sing When I Am in My Little Bed, accompanied by the curate."
But I'm afraid, before you finished your joke, Kenneth challenged you. And what was the
Challenged me? What?
It was a repetition of a word.
Yes, there was, I'm afraid. Do you know what the word was?
Can't remember now.
Can't remember. It's a foul.
I let him go on because he wanted to hear the joke. The word was announcement. He did repeat it. And that's when you pressed your buzzer, so I know you spotted it. So, Kenneth, I give you a point on the subject, and the subject is postcards, and there are 26 seconds left starting now.
Well, it's unfortunate I should have been given this subject because I really know nothing about postcards.
Peter Jones is challenged.
You weren't given the subject, you took it.
Yes, but after he'd won the challenge, I gave him the subject. I said, I'll give the subject to you. So it's a wrong challenge. So he keeps the subject, and with another point, and there are 22 seconds left starting now.
Postcards, I think, are very rude. I think if you've got any decency...
Sheila Hancock is challenged.
They're not necessarily rude, darling. It's just your mind.
I'm not talking about what they're depicting. I mean,
Sheila,
ordinary
what is your
postcard is
challenge?
rude. You should put your letter in an
Deviation.
envelope.
Why?
That's my argument. I'm not
postcards
talking about
aren't
what's
rude.
written on them.
Postcards are rude. Well, they're not
No,
all
they aren't
rude.
rude.
So do
No.
I give it to Sheila?
Yes,
I had a
come on,
postcard
'cause I
the
might
other
win
day
if you
from
give
the
it to
Isle
me.
of Man. Pictures of trams. I defy the most depraved person to find anything rude in there.
Right, Sheila, you have a point, and you have 17 seconds on postcards starting now.
It is one of the things that you have to do when you go on holiday.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
The agent isn't one of the things you have to do.
Well, you
when
do
go
if
on
you're
holiday. I
nice.
don't send postcards on holiday.
You don't have to do it, but it's a phrase you can use. One of the... Oh, dear, that's one of those impossible decisions.
No.
So I think I'll
I
put it
would
to the
like Miss
audience.
Hancock.
Audience, will
I
you
don't
cheer
want to give it to
if you
the
agree
third
with
time
Derek's
if you
challenge, and will you boo if you disagree? And will you all do it together now? I've forgotten who they were booing for.
Derek,
You're
let's
booing
go.
for Sheila, so...
No, they're booing for Derek.
Yes, you.
But you want Derek to have it. All right, Derek, you've got a point from the audience,
No,
unfortunately.
I haven't. She's got a point.
Oh, all right. So Sheila's got a point from the audience, and there are 14 seconds left with you, Sheila, starting now.
You can have views of the seaside or the mountains or a town that you're in, or you can occasionally have the dirty ones, or just ones of little fairies or witches, tales.
Derek Nimmo is challenged.
She hesitated before her fairy.
Yes. Derek Nimmo, you have a point for a correct challenge, and you have 1 second on postcards.
I once read a
now.
postcard of George Bernard Shaw, and he replied to...
Well, you probably guessed what happened then. It was neck and neck between Derek and Sheila. Just let you know that Kenneth finished only just in 4th place behind Peter Jones. No, really, only just. He got a lot of points there. And Peter had 8 points, and he did very, very well. We didn't get many in the last half of the show because Derek got the extra point for speaking when the whistle went to become this week's winner. With that, we do hope that you've enjoyed it, and from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett.
we present Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, Peter Jones, and David Jacobs in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard from the announcer, we are very thrilled and delighted to welcome this week, for the first time to play Just a Minute, David Jacobs. Very courageously and sportingly, I think, come along to do battle, a battle of wits against these three clever and experienced exponents of the game. I'm going to ask them to speak as usual, if they can, on some subject that I will give them, without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject which is on the card in front of me. And we'll start the show this week with Derek Nimmo. Derek, the subject that dear Mister's thought of is My Giddy Aunt. Would you talk about your giddy aunt for 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
My giddy aunt was called Mary Sudbury. She was a sergeant in the paratroop regiment, a very large lady indeed. I remember when I was training for the Suez Crisis, what became that, in Cyprus, I was out on manoeuvres one day and I saw coming towards me this large...
David Jacobs has challenged.
Well, I think he said large twice.
He did, David. Your first
Very
one.
good.
The first point to our newcomer, David Jacobs. He gets a point for a correct challenge, and he takes over the subject now with 41 seconds to go on My Giddy Aunt, starting now.
My giddy aunt was a very frustrated person because she was an ice skater living on an island in the Pacific. It was an
Clement Freud has challenged.
I was going to say deviation, but he said she was very frustrated, and I would like David A. to
You're wriggling
accept
out
the
of a
point.
bad challenge. He will get a point
I
because
would like to welcome him and say good evening. I'm sorry I spoke, and
Oh, we're never sorry when you speak, Clement, but don't try and wriggle out
I'll
of
go
the
on,
poor
then.
challenges. David, you have got another point because that was a wrong challenge. You keep the subject. You have 31 seconds left. My Giddy Aunt, starting now.
She was a frustrated person.
Dear Clement Freud got in this time.
she repeated, he repeated.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Clement, I agree with your challenge, so you take the subject and having got a point for a correct challenge. 28 seconds. My Giddy Aunt, starting now.
When My Giddy Aunt's vertigo reached...
Peter Jones, the challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, it's...
He said, He actually said,
A bit unkind, isn't it?
Well, you have the subject, Peter, of My Giddy Aunt now with 25 seconds left, starting now.
I remember her so vividly, sitting on the horse on this roundabout, going round and up and down.
See? Very clever, Peter. I think I know your challenge. Eric.
Fell into that trap.
No, he didn't say round.
round.
He said round and up and down.
And roundabout.
No,
Roundabout is not...
Roundabout was you were
No,
sitting
it was
on.
worth
The
a
noun
go.
roundabout.
It was worth a go. It was worth a go.
He led you into a challenge which he gets a point for, and there are 17 seconds left on My Giddy Aunt, starting now.
She wore a straw hat with a lot of fruit on it. Cherries, pears, grapes, and a few feathers as well. And she whooped it up in the most amazing way.
Derek Nimmo has challenged
A repetition
again.
of up. Up and down, up and down.
Oh, wow, you.
That's what I call a tough challenge, but being a correct one, I have to give it to you. And, of course, it's a wicked one, too, because there's only 5 seconds left. You've got in just before the whistle, Derek. You have My Giddy Aunt again. 5 seconds starting now.
And as this vast woman floated down towards me, I said, My giddy aunt, it's my giddy aunt.
Well, at the end of that round of My Giddy Aunt, everybody spoke, everybody got some points, and the lead is held equally between Derek Nimmo, David Jacobs, and Peter Jones. They all have 2. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is Our One Hope. Would you talk about that starting now?
Our one hope is a rabbit called Winkle who is black and white. We've given up the cat. The dog is pretty useless by now. The children have gone away. My giddy aunt has left for Cyprus to take part in another aerobatics demonstration for the local government. But this animal, which I've previously mentioned and therefore not allowed to refer to again by name, is totally our last hope. If war should break out again, There is no other person to whom I would entrust the safety of the...
Peter Jones has challenged.
The rabbit isn't a person.
You don't know our rabbit. Your rabbit may well not be a person.
This is one of those difficult things.
We can't say to
if you have a
another
pet,
person.
you often refer to it as a person, but basically I agree. In principle, I think...
Well,
to
not
be
that
correct.
sort of pet. A penthouse pet, possibly.
Yes, but I think you're right, Peter. It is an animal, and therefore you should refer to it in that way. So I give you the challenge. A point to you. 24 seconds left. Our one hope starting now.
I welcome the opportunity to address the English-speaking world on this momentous subject of our one last hope, which I believe fervently, ladies and
David
gentlemen...
Jacobs has challenged.
Well, I thought the question was was it our one last hope, was it?
No, our one hope.
Our one hope. Well, he started talking about our one last hope.
Well, that's the particular one I'm talking about.
Oh, is it? Then we are in trouble.
We are in trouble because, you see, his one hope could be his last hope.
Yes.
Yes, I've
I
only
hope it
ever
is.
had one, and it was the last one.
So I don't think, strictly speaking, David, he has deviated, though it was a good challenge. 13 seconds with you, Peter. Our one hope starting now.
Get behind the United Nations and seek to pass words of wisdom, kindness, and love, one to the other, across the seas and the dominions and...
David Jacobs, will you begin the next round, please? The subject is my status symbol. Can you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
My status symbol is unknown to most people. I do have the privilege of using, after my name, 4 letters. T-T-O-M.
Derek Nimmo has challenged you.
Repetition of T, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it?
It is
tough. Oh, it's tough,
No,
baby.
If we'd had the VC, this would never have come up, would
I
it?
deserve the VC for coming.
Yes, I think you do, David. I'm afraid it was such a deliberate repetition, I have to watch it against you and say, Derek, you have the subject of my status symbol with 47 seconds left, starting now.
My status symbol is a signed photograph of David Jacobs.
David Jacobs got in.
Yes, because you see, he stumbled over my name.
And therefore you thought it was hesitation.
Hesitation.
And I would agree and give you the subject back and say you have 43 seconds for my status symbol, starting now.
T-O-M stands for TOTS.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of T, O, and M.
You see, you had the T before, and if you repeat it a second time, I would...
My goodness, well done.
It's a tough game, David, and it's wicked the way they played. Clement, you have a point for a correct challenge, and there are 38 seconds on my status symbol, starting now.
My granny said to me, don't wear your status symbol on your sleeve, otherwise you'll stop the traffic and women of indeterminate age will come up to you and say, excuse me, isn't that your status symbol?
Right, David J.
Oh, I made a terrible mistake.
No, that's right. You probably don't realize...
Hand probably slipped on the buzzer, didn't it, David?
Actually,
yes,
it
rather
did.
greasy in this climate.
Very
and
wet.
everything, yes.
Now, it gives me an opportunity to remind the audience, if they don't already know, that you can repeat the subject on the card.
Yes.
And that's what
I
you
did
must
know
do.
that, and I'm...
No, that's right. Well, we won't award any points and tell Clement that he now has 26 seconds to continue with my status symbol, starting now.
And when I visited the upper reaches of Suffolk, even as far as Norfolk, the status symbol diminished astonishingly. It was quite small when I got to Lincolnshire, and people said, excuse me, is that small thing...
Derek Nimmo has
Repetition
challenged.
small.
Yes.
Yes, I'm afraid his smalls got him into trouble. And there are 10 seconds for you, Derek, on my status symbol, starting now.
My fellow member of the panel, who I illustrated, getting this lovely...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitate.
I think there was a hesitation. Yes, 7 seconds
My
left.
stutter is very difficult.
I know
And
it
I just
is.
find it rather difficult to get my words out occasionally. It's very nasty.
I know, and when you have
Very
3 people staring
buzzing.
at you and trying to
I wasn't
intimidate
looking
you
at them. I
into
was looking at the audience.
mistakes.
Much prettier than that lot.
I look at the audience so much I cannot often hear you, which is very difficult for me. Clement, 7 seconds on my status symbol, starting now.
In Devon, Dorset, Wiltshire, and Cornwall, my status symbol tends to be a mulberry bush, which hangs from my belt.
Well, Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went, so at the end of that round, a very interesting situation. Peter Jones is in the lead. He's 2 points ahead of Derek Nimmo, David Jacobs, and Clement Freud, who are all equal in second place. And Derek Nimmo, your turn to start. The subject, laughing. Would you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
All sorts of things can make you laugh, can't they, really? It's very extraordinary. I look at this audience tonight. I'm in positive hoots. And there are a great welter of people coming here on this wonderfully warm evening, sweltering away. And I look at them and I laugh out loud. Who? He, says I. Because I think they must be a lot of old chumps and mugs. They've got better things to do than hang around sitting on these seats. They could be out wandering along the banks. What are you...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of they.
Well tried, Peter. He did say it more than once, yes.
Are we going to have ands?
Well,
and
that's
these
a
as well,
repetition
now?
if he says it more than once.
Yes,
isn't
but
it?
we don't usually bother to put each other up on ands and theys and these.
Well, he
and
said
buts.
up. What about up?
Well, all right.
What about up?
Because you're quits now.
That
Because
up
of
rankles.
I know. Because of your up, I will give him your they. I mean, because of his up, you can have his they.
Oh, well, thanks. You
That's,
always make it sound rather patronizing when you give me a point.
No,
I
I'm just
don't-
I try to be fair in an impossible
I
situation.
know, and you fail most of the time.
I like that. That makes me laugh anyway, I can tell you. Laughing,
Why do you think they asked me back? Because they didn't have a chairman who consistently failed. You
It's
wouldn't have a
not
program.
for me to try and unravel the workings of their minds. Poor deranged creatures.
All right, Peter, I've unraveled
No, I
yours.
admire
You
the
have
way you
rankled
keep
over the
trying.
up, so you channeled through the...
But no more
You
ups and
challenged
days.
on a they, and you have got 34 seconds on laughing starting now.
It can be very good for you. It's an excellent exercise because the muscles of the chest are moved and jostled, and the joints of the shoulders very often are...
Hesitation or heathetation, I don't know
Yes,
what...
he couldn't think of another
Yes,
word
I
that
certainly
jostled or
was
moved
hesitating.
or
Yes.
described.
Yes.
So, Clement, you have a point on the laughing situation, and there are 20 seconds left starting now.
One of the most regular things that makes people laugh are jokes about politicians, as in...
David Jacobs is challenged.
I think one of the things that makes you laugh is. So I don't know whether
No,
what sort
one
of challenge
is,
that
that
is.
is
yes,
correct
yes.
English.
Was
One
that
of-
all right?
One of the things is, that is
That's
correct
right. He said one of the things are.
Yes.
Oh, well, then that is incorrect
Yeah,
English, and you
yeah.
have a point.
Is that all right?
And you have 14 seconds, David, on laughing starting now.
There is a very famous gramophone record that revolves at 78. And
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
No, I don't think so. I disagree. 5
Well,
seconds
it wasn't
on
going
laughing.
at 78, it was about 53, I think.
5 seconds on laughing, David, starting now.
it is called...
I'm sorry.
Derek Nimmo has
It's
challenged.
total reflex action. When you hear a hesitation, one forgets that you're being lenient because he's a new thing, and one automatically presses it. I'm so sorry. It's just automatically, when there was a correct challenge, one tends to make it. But I withdraw it, and I'm sorry I did it. I realised.
Does he not
David
lose a
Jacobs has another point, and there are 4.5 seconds on laughing, starting now.
It's called The Laughing Policeman. A very...
Those wicked
good.
challenges against David Jacobs for a hint of hesitation, but not a real one, gave him the lead at the end of that round. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is St. Martin. Would you talk about him for 60 seconds, starting now?
There are, of course, a number of St. Martins, but the one that I would like to talk about was previously known as Blessed Martin of Porres. He lived in, I think, the 15th century. My hagiography is weak. In South America, and had an extraordinary ability for communion with animals. There was a time when the monastery in which he resided had a plague of rats and mice, and the abbot was about to put down poison which would have destroyed these animals. But
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of animals.
I'm afraid there was, but it was such an interesting story.
Yes, well, go on with it. I don't mind. Just give me a point. Give me a point and
All
then
right, give
continue
Peter
with it.
Jones a point. Let Clement Freud continue with the story.
I
That's
don't
all he
speak
heard
for
about
nothing,
St.
I'm sorry.
Peter, take over the subject of St. Martin. 29 seconds left, starting now.
I'd like to speak about the other St. Martin who resided in the fields and had this...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Well, it's absolute nonsense. The church is called St. Martin's
in the field. Yes, St. Martin
certainly didn't reside in the field.
Yes, he did in not the same field, but he was in a field. We all know St. Martin. Just in Tuscany, you remember? He lived at the side of a mountain. You must know.
Well, I suppose, you see, this is the thing. He was not, strictly speaking, deviating from the subject of the car, because there could have been a St. Martin who resided... No, you don't reside in a field. That's living. No, you can... I think that's a bit... I think
Well,
that's a bit
he
dubious.
resided in a field because he couldn't stand it in Siena. You remember during the revolt in Siena in 1429.
Yes, I remember it well.
All right, I think you're very well established that you were deviating.
Revolution, wasn't
Yes.
it? When all the growers of Chianti
That's right, that's right.
banded together.
The Chianti
Preserved
Revolution.
the name of Chianti. I
Remember them very well, yes. And David Jacobs hesitated as well. So, Clement Freud, you have the subject back, and there are 23 seconds left on St. Martin, starting now.
One of the most extraordinary things about St. Martin was that it was some 450 years after his death that he was finally canonized, an exceedingly rare thing in the Catholic Church. But the amount of rejoicing that took place, not only among black people, of whom he was one, but among devotees all over the world, was fantastic.
Clement Freud got a
You can
well-deserved point
talk
for speaking.
religious nonsense and nobody
Because
has
it's
the courage.
Simon de Porres,
It is
isn't it?
extraordinary, isn't it?
It's Simon de Porres, isn't it? Not...
No, it was Martin of Porres.
Peter Jones, will you begin the next round putting out a fire? The subject is yours, 60 seconds, starting now.
The great thing to remember when you're putting out a fire is not to use water, because that can be terribly dangerous. Find, if you can, a bucket of sand.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was.
Yes.
50 seconds for you on putting out a fire, Derek, starting now.
All sorts of rather unusual ways of putting out fires, actually. I remember when I was in the Wolf Cubs, we had a very curious way of putting them out, which I couldn't possibly relate on this story. But anyway, the more conventional method is to call for the fire brigade.
Clement Freud has
Repetition of methods.
yes, I'm afraid there was. Clement, you have the subject, 36 seconds, putting out a fire, starting now.
Perhaps the most important single ingredient to putting out a fire is actually having a conflagration, because otherwise it is totally pointless. But faced with, say, a burning house, which this afternoon will do very well to illustrate what I'm going to talk about, open the windows and the doors, they tell you on television, because if you do that, I can't really remember.
David Jacobs has challenged.
Don't open the windows and the doors.
That's right, don't
yes,
open it.
yes.
It's a drama.
If anybody is listening, which
If anybody's
I always
listening, yes.
want.
Who happens to have a handy fire going.
Shut the windows and doors, and then you can't get out. It's whichever way you want it. David, I agree with your challenge. You have 12 seconds on putting out a fire, starting now.
Get out of your motor car, close the door behind you, run as quickly as you can to those brushes that are by the woodside, and you will find if you beat...
David Jacobs once again got the point for speaking when the whistle went. He's maintained his lead. He's 2 points ahead of Clement Freud, who's 1 point ahead of Peter Jones, and he's 1 point ahead of Derek Nimmo. And David Jacobs, will you begin the next round? And the subject is patience. Would you talk on that? 60 seconds, starting now.
My doctor tells me that I am one of his very best patients. I don't have to see him very often because I carry with me an enormous stock of medicaments. If I travel the country, as I often do, I take all sorts of bottles...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
43 seconds, patience, Derek, starting now.
The jack, the knave, king, queen, ace, 2, 3, clubs, diamonds, hearts and spades. How lovely to play a game of patience. I do think on warm summer evenings like today, to sit in the garden with a table in front of you and to put the playing cards down.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of cards.
Yes. 25 seconds, patience with you, Peter, starting now.
This is a great, virtue. Imagine that woman sitting on the monument year after monotonous...
Derek, you challenge. What is it?
Hesitation, but I mean, it was...
No, he didn't hesitate.
But he blew up then
Yes,
whenever you
that
called him.
kind
Year after monotonous. The repetition of ha 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 then.
Conversational style, which I shall never be able to change.
No, I thought it was very clever. He did that, and you challenged. Your buzzer went before he paused.
No, he did not, actually.
Before I hesitated. Yes, I think it did, now you come to think of it.
I think
Yes.
that's one you could put to the audience then.
You
I
seem
wanna
to
see
have
what's
caught
going
on to this game in the last 5 minutes, Nicholas, in the most extraordinary way.
All right, well, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Peter. Say you have 14 seconds patience starting now.
And the game, of course, is played by oneself, sitting in a private room, if you have one, and a table is necessary, chair, your health ones are best.
You will not be surprised to hear that at the end of that round, Peter Jones has taken the lead. And Derek Nimmo, your turn to start. The subject, old wives' tales, and there are 60 seconds starting now.
Hang on, I've got it written down.
Well, I'm sorry. David Jacobs was challenged.
Well, I thought he hesitated.
I think he did. You have a point, David. And there are 57 seconds on old wives' tales starting now.
An old wife once said to me, if you have chilblains, get a large bowl and pour specially prepared water into it. Take off your shoes, remove your socks, and dangle your feet into the actual appliance I have mentioned before. If you are like Derek Nimmo, then you can twiddle your...
Hesitation, yes, because he couldn't find another word for toes. Don't think there is one. 35 seconds, Derek, on old wives' tales starting now.
I've always indulged in polygamy, and my oldest wife is a fairly ancient gorilla with a particularly large tail. And when I see her cut... What's the matter?
Peter Freud is challenged.
Hesitation.
Oh, no, you're being too difficult and devious now. No, I don't think so. No, so he has another point, and there are 19 seconds on old wives' tales starting now.
Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her poor doggy a bone. When she got there, the aforementioned was bare, and the wretched canines of none. Which seems to be a fairly stupid part of an old wives' tale.
Clement Freud has challenged you.
What, when? When?
On the aforementioned. What was your challenge, Clement?
Deviation.
Why?
From the basic nursery rhyme.
How do you
Which is
judge
also
on that?
not an old wives' tale.
I told me by a very old wife.
Yes, actually, that's a good challenge, because the old wives' tale does say that the cupboard was bare, and therefore you were deviating from the old wives' tale.
Why?
You were giving your own version of it. So that is therefore devious.
Well done.
The audience want me to give it to Derek Nimmo, don't you? Yeah. Derek Nimmo has a point.
Thank you.
There's too many of them out there for me to alienate. 9.5 seconds left. Old wives' tales, Derek, starting now.
If there are any wonderful, dear old wives in the audience tonight and they would like me to look at their tales after the show, perhaps they could pop around and I would be most happy to...
I'm afraid we have no more time, so I'll give you the final score. Clement Freud, unusually for him, finished up in 4th place, just a little way behind David Jacobs, playing the game for the first time. He did extraordinarily well because he was only 1 point behind Derek Nimmo, and Derek was only 1 point behind this week's winner, Peter Jones. We do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and will want to tune in again next time. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Castles.
we present Clement Freud, Peter Jones, Warren Mitchell and Jean Marsh in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you just heard from our announcer, we're delighted to welcome to the programme this week for the first time, Warren Mitchell. And we hope he enjoys the experience. He's come here very courageously to do battle with Jean Marsh and our two experienced players, Peter Jones and Clement Freud. And, just to remind you, as usual, they will try and speak, if they can, for just 1 minute on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject, if they can. And we'll begin the show this week with Peter Jones. Peter, can you talk on what I don't usually say? There's a difficult, interesting subject. 60 seconds, starting now.
I don't usually say what I don't usually say, which is how very happy I am to be here on this beautiful afternoon playing this amusing game devised so well by Ian Messiter, who's sitting up there next to the chairman to end all of them, Nicholas Parsons. And he's...
Jean Marsh is challenged.
A hesitation.
Yes, I think so. Once he thought of my name, he hesitated, and I'm not surprised.
I hesitated just before, actually.
Yes, you hesitated there as well.
Yes.
So, Peter, I agree with Jean's challenge, so she gets a point for a correct challenge and takes over the subject of what I don't usually say, Jean, and there are 36 seconds left, starting now.
What I don't usually say is best left unsaid, but as I'm being paid to say what I don't usually say, I'll try to. I am a liar. That's why I don't usually say what I'm saying right now, which is...
And Clement Freud has challenged.
Repetition of what I'm saying.
Yes, what I don't usually say, the subject on the card you can repeat, but not the other phrase. Clement, correct challenge, a point to you, and 26 seconds on what I don't usually say, starting now.
Oh, that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in
Peter
England...
Jones has challenged you.
Hesitation.
...that do no work today. What's he that wishes so, my cousin Westmoreland?
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
Not only a hesitation, a bloody awful performance.
You can't buzz people on that. That's why we invited you.
I see.
That's what I don't usually say.
Well, all right, Pete. Actually, you didn't hesitate, which was the first challenge.
I thought he hesitated
I know
after
you
about
thought
4 words.
so, and I heard your challenge. I disagree with it, Peter. So
I see, very well. You're entitled to disagree with it.
Yes. And Clement gets a point for a wrong challenge, keeps the subject, and there are 17 seconds, what I don't usually say, Clement, starting now.
What I hardly ever say is they're changing guard at Buckingham Palace. Christopher Robin went down with Alice, something many of us have come down with over the years.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of come down.
No. Went down.
Went down.
Well, the repetition of down.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say down with, which would have been a much more clearer challenge, but I think we'll give it to you on that, Peter. And there are 6 seconds left on what I don't usually say, starting now.
And I'm certainly not going to say it now, because I've kept my lips sealed for so long. I feel that the time...
Well, Peter Jones speaking when the whistle went, which tells us, by the way, that 60 seconds is up, gained the extra point at the end of that round, so he's in the lead with Clement Freud. And Clement, will you begin the next round? The subject is the in thing. Would you talk on that for 1 minute, starting now?
If you look at the average human being, you will notice that as often as not, he wears a hat, sports a tie. You may notice a shirt, a jacket, vest, waistcoat, trousers, socks, shoes with laces.
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
It must be wrong. I can't remember the subject now.
The in thing?
Yes, but that's got nothing to do with the in thing, has it?
You mean he's deviating?
Oh, definitely. He's been doing that for years. And been getting away with it. He's not going to get away with it here this afternoon.
I tell you what he got away with earlier, because he said notice twice, and then he paused. And
Did he
didn't
really?
give him challenge for the pause.
Ah, well.
Anyway, Warren, I think that he probably was deviating from the in thing to some extent.
I don't see how you can get to an in thing before you describe the out things.
Well, the answer to that, Clement, is you should describe the out things much quicker, and then you wouldn't be accused of deviation.
The minute would never be up.
Ah, that is the great secret, isn't it? So, Warren, we haven't heard from you. You have a chance to talk to us now on the in thing, and there are 42 seconds left, starting now.
I wish I'd never challenged. Well, the in thing, there was the pancreas, the sympancreas, the liver, the kidney, the lights. You couldn't get inner than that. And that...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation?
Yes.
I was breathing, you fool.
You mustn't take such long, silent breaths.
On this game.
Yes, well, I see you're all trained to do it without breathing. Well, carry on if you're going to be like that. I won't breathe.
I tell you what we'll do, Warren, is you haven't played the game before, and that was...
I don't want any sympathy, thank you.
I'm not giving you sympathy, I'm giving you encouragement.
Yes.
And as it was a very sharp challenge, we'll let you continue.
I don't want to continue.
That's part of the fun of the game.
Is it? Right. The in thing.
You've got a point for that. 34 seconds on the in thing, starting now.
Yes, I found, when I was very young, of course, and I haven't found it recently.
Clement Freud challenge.
Found it twice, didn't I?
Yes.
I'm learning.
And Clement Freud found it that time, so he gets a point for that, and there are 28 seconds on the in thing, starting now.
As often as not, adjusting one's panty girdle, the in thing stares you in the face. Hello, in thing, you say, even as the person wearing that garment is about to remove herself from the scene and make to a neighbouring underground station.
Well, I don't believe that Mr. Freud wears a panty girdle, and he can't
Don't you?
surely be being lascivious.
But I
on
thought the
BBC.
girl who removed herself from the scene was wearing the panty girdle.
Oh, I thought he was removing his own.
Well, he might wear a panty girdle.
I mean, he might need one, but I didn't think he wore one.
Is this the same as the average person he was referring to earlier on? Because that was a man, he said. Definitely wore a tie.
Well, anyway, whether Clement was wearing a panty girdle or not, the point is that he wasn't deviating from the subject of the in thing. He might be making a very good case out for the panty girdle at this present moment. And so, Clement, I don't think it was a devious... the challenge was correct. And so you have 12 seconds to continue on the in thing, starting now.
Friends of mine who work in milk bars tell me that a chocolate-topped malted milk sundae, often sold on a Tuesday, is absolutely the in thing in Golders Green, whereas in Swiss Cottage, Hampstead...
Well, Clement Freud kept going magnificently on the in thing in that round, so he increased his lead, got the extra point for speaking when the whistle went, and has got a very undoubted lead at the end of that round. Jean Marsh, will you take the next round? The subject, rhubarb. Will you talk on rhubarb for 60 seconds, starting now?
Oh, what an unpleasant task. Pale pinkish brown sticks with pale green leaves on the end, chopped up and then cooked to a mush, placed in charlottes, pies and tarts. Not that I would ever do anything like that, because I think it's horrid, the furry taste it leaves on your teeth, and anyway, my father says it's poisonous. The only rhubarb I do like is when I was a model in Paris, I had an apartment on the Rue Barbe, which is just off the Boulevard Saint-Michel. I stayed there for about 3 months, making a lot of money as a model, working for many famous...
Clement Freud is challenged twice.
No, once. But there have been 2 repetitions. Pale, right at the beginning, which I let go. But model.
It's too late.
Yes, model.
No, it was model. He let the pale go. He has to have his one-upmanship. He let the pale...
No, you said I pressed my buzzer twice. I was
Yes.
trying to justify that.
I know you were trying
It might have been
You more than justified. You played the first time for pale, the second time for model, which was the last thing she said. So the repetition is correct, and a point to you and 32 seconds on rhubarb, starting now.
When I was a small boy and played Ftatatita in Antony and Cleopatra, or it may even have been Caesar and the lady of the same name, the extras who stood about the ends of the stage were encouraged, one to say Mrs. Siddons and the other rhubarb. And the joint effect of those 2 words gave a sort of hubbub.
Jean Marsh is challenged.
I've had quite a lot of hesitation.
Yes, because he was just about to repeat the ub. And so, Jean, I agree with your challenge. And you have 3.5 seconds on rhubarb, starting now.
Rhubarb is a disgusting fruit, I think, and should be banned.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of disgusting.
Yes, it was disgusting before.
Oh, quite right.
Yes, quite right.
Yes, and you are much more
So,
gentle,
Peter,
it's
you've got in just before the whistle, and there's 1 second, no, half a second on rhubarb, Peter, starting now.
The cook at our school.
Clement Freud is still in the lead, just ahead of Peter Jones. G. Marsh and Warren Mitchell are behind, equal in third place. Warren, will you begin the next round? The subject, the most disgraceful thing I was ever caught at. There are 60 seconds, and you start now.
Yes, when I was at infant school, I had Miss Henderson. Well, when I say I... when I say I... Miss Henderson...
You were challenged before.
I was I? Yes.
Clement.
Dear boy.
Well, it was going to be deviation, but I'm perfectly prepared to accept his explanation.
Well, I don't think
he never
that-
had Miss Henderson. It
No,
was all
I don't think at
a
infant school...
misunderstanding.
I don't think at infant school he could have managed to be devious with Miss Henderson. He might have had the thoughts.
I don't want... Yes.
I don't want any of this consenting infants.
No.
But why do we have to repeat Miss Henderson?
I don't know.
Well, if you'd seen Miss Henderson, you'd understand why.
Well, if Miss Henderson is listening, I hope you're enjoying what we're saying about you, dear.
Yes.
The subject is still with you, Warren, the most disgraceful thing I was ever caught at, or at which
Yes.
I was caught. And there are 53 seconds left, starting now.
It's an awfully long time, as that lady, which I mustn't ever repeat again, said to me. Well, she was responsible for my education, and so I was grateful. She was able to read upside down, which is a tremendous talent for a teacher, because and she would bend over and to see what I had written. I was doing joined up. Sorry, there was a buzz.
You were quite pleased there was a buzz, I think. Well, he seemed to be struggling, and I wanted to help.
What a pity. We thought we'd let him struggle.
Oh, I see. Well, it seemed...
What was your challenge?
Hesitation.
Yes.
Absolute rubbish. I was...
Yes, it was rubbish also,
Yes.
but there was also hesitation.
Peter, you have a point and 29 seconds for Miss Henderson. Oh, I'm sorry, no. 29 seconds for the most disgraceful thing I was ever caught at, starting now.
Well, at my school, the cook was a cordon noir. He used to specialize in these extraordinary dishes that I would have told you about when we were discussing rhubarb earlier on. But it so happened that in the potting shed behind the cricket pavilion, in front of the fives court, and just on the other side of the playing field, there was a little spot which was concealed from those enthusiasts who were playing games.
A well-deserved point, Peter, and another one for speaking when the whistle went, puts you into the lead alongside Clement Freud at the end of that round. And your turn to begin, Peter. The subject, Copenhagen. Would you talk about that? 60 seconds, starting now.
Copenhagen. What a beautiful city, built as it is on that wonderful harbour with the mermaid looking over it, sitting on the rock. Birthplace of Hans Christian Andersen and Immanuel Kant, friends, I believe, when they were children. I wonder what went wrong. And then, after that, it became a tourist paradise. The gardens of Tivoli have given their name to pleasure palaces.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, all that pleasure he thought of, and he hesitated. There are 36 seconds for you now, Clement, on Copenhagen, starting now.
One of my favorite songs goes, "Wonderful, repeat Copenhagen." And this was in the charts and sung by many of the greatest songsters in the country, also in cities, towns, and urban rural districts. It is the capital of Denmark, which is part of the Scandinavian complex, and pretty complicated it is, because if you go there, no one speaks the same language as anyone else, as a result of which they sit around and chat to one another in English, which is called the lingua franca.
Clement Freud speaking when the whistle went, then increased his lead at the end of that round. Peter Jones second place, Jean Marsh and Warren Mitchell in third place. And Jean, will you begin the next round? The subject, the necessities. Would you talk on that for 1 minute, starting now?
My necessities have changed over the years. When I was young, I only wanted a roof over my head and a bed to sleep on at night and just enough to eat, and quite a lot of clothes I would have liked. These days, they're not my necessities. I don't care about a roof over my head.
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
Yes, you can say the title, can't you?
Yeah, but you can't say roof over her head
Roof
twice.
over her head twice? Of course she can't.
No.
I was going to say, I'm glad you got this thought transference thing going there. It's
So, Warren, you have
That's
a point.
outrageous.
I know, but we have to be outrageous occasionally. 46 seconds on the necessities, Warren, starting now.
Yes, my necessity with Miss Henderson was that I should endeavour, whenever possible, to stand up and look down the front of her extraordinary dress, which was...
Peter Jones'
It was an dress. It was an dress.
Yes.
Dress. I was a Cockney in those days, before I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic. It wasn't a hesitation. Dress.
I think it was a hesitation. I think the audience think it was a hesitation.
All right, I'll put it to the audience if you like, one of those difficult things. Warren's making out a case for himself. If you agree with
They
Peter...
want to know what happened with him and Miss Henderson there.
And if you'd shut up, they'd find out, you see.
If you wouldn't hesitate, I would.
Well, all right, I'll let the audience be the final judges. If you agree with Peter's challenge of hesitation, will you cheer? And if you disagree, will you boo? And will you all do it together now? The squeaks have it. All right, the boos have it. They want to hear about Miss Henderson. Sorry, Peter. I think justice was on your side, but...
what was the original subject that Miss Marsh was talking on?
The necessities.
The
Do you want to give it
necessities,
back?
Yes,
of course.
I give it to you, actually, so you needn't worry, Warren. It's
necessities.
all right. 35 seconds on the necessities starting now.
Yes, well, it was necessary to learn to read and write, and that's what this lovely lady did try and do for all of us in that extraordinary elementary school somewhere in the East End of London. Now, she could, as I said before...
Clement Freud is challenged.
If you said it before, it must be repetition.
But I was going to rephrase it differently, so I wouldn't
That
have
would
said
be
it
just
again.
another repetition, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't have been a repetition at all.
I think out of your own mouth, you committed the sin of repetition.
Did I really?
Yes. So, Clement, a good challenge. The audience applause confirms it. 20 seconds on the necessities starting now.
The necessities are rice, sugar, milk, cream, sago, semolina, potatoes, rhubarb, peas, beans, spinach, parsley, coriander, cumin, pepper.
Clement Freud, your turn to begin. The subject, fright. Would you talk about that for just 1 minute, starting now?
This is just one mispronunciation of my name, but there are many others. Also, fright is a sensation of fear imposed by whatever outside phenomenon that you would care to mention. It is imposed sometimes by bats.
Jean Marsh has challenged.
I think you said imposed.
Twice, yes, he did, Jean, and
Least.
you have the subject. And there are 44 seconds for you on fright, starting now.
The only fright I've ever suffered from is radio fright. I need a lot of courage to come to this studio and take part in this game because I listen to it, and I think the other participants are not only witty, intelligent, attractive, and informative, but a highly delightful bunch of people altogether. And I feel that it's...
Do carry on. I'm putting the buzzer down.
I feel I suffer from gall in having the nerve to even walk through the studio door. But having
Is she
actually
lovely?
got here, I feel it is beholden on me to hold the end up of women's suffrage and be
Hold your
as
end up, dear.
interesting and witty and informative and attractive as
point,
possible.
Jean.
But I have a theory that the producer asks me to this
Yes, well
studio.
done. That was a clever bit of feminine flattery there. Got her 2 points there. Well done, Jean. You move forward, but you're still in 4th place, alas. 1 point behind the men, and behind Warren, and a little bit behind Peter, and Clement Freud still in the lead. And Warren Mitchell, your turn to begin. The subject, getting cut off. That's what Ian's thought of for you. I don't know what he expects you to do with it, but try and talk on it if you can for 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, as my friend on my left will know, getting cut off can be construed in many different ways. But the results, I'm assured, by all those who know, are quite beneficial. And who am I, a poor, frail thing, to argue with some of the most eminent theological and medical authorities in the country? I would, if I was given the opportunity, probably have refused this signal honor which was thrust upon me. But there you are, when you are...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation, if it's cut off, it couldn't be thrust upon you.
I think the situation psychologically was thrust upon him, even if something else actually occurred. Warren, I disagree with the challenge, so you keep the subject and there are 16 seconds on getting cut off starting now.
Well, some have greatness thrust upon them, as my...
Peter Jones is challenged.
A repetition of thrust.
Upon, yes. Well done, Peter. You have the subject now with 12 seconds on getting cut off starting now.
I think of it more in connection with the telephone and speaking to someone quite interesting who happens to have been able to get through on a very difficult line, and then suddenly the operator makes a clicking.
Peter Jones got the point for speaking when the whistle went, and Clement, your turn to begin. The subject, my other self. Can you tell us something about that in 60 seconds, starting now?
I was speaking recently at a dinner in Leeds, and at the end of my address, a member of the audience got up and said, "Mr. Freud, we always read and hear that people who appear on television are actually quite different in real life. What are you like?" And I explained that I was 4'9" and spoke with a Yorkshire accent. And there was total silence as the people in that room agreed wholeheartedly. My other self actually is very tall, slim, hirsute to a fault, with a waistline and tiny feet, immaculately dressed, sartorially impeccable, eyesight perfect, nose Romo-Grecian, teeth.
Peter Jones challenge. You kept going for 57 seconds, and you got to your teeth, and you dried up. Peter, you have 3 seconds on my other self, starting now.
Well, he goes under the same name on these sports programs. It's nothing to do with me.
Well done. Well, at the end of that round, Peter Jones got the extra point. He's only just a little behind Clement Freud still. Jean Marsh and Warren Mitchell are both trailing a little. Jean Marsh, your turn to begin. The subject, how to. Can you talk on how to? 60 seconds starting now.
I do know a very good way. If you're alone in your house and lying on a sofa and you have enough time to put on the radio, have good music in the background, slip into the kitchen and possibly make yourself something quite delicious to eat, relax while you're eating, listening to the music and make your plans how to, this is what you do.
Warren Mitchell got in first.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, she wasn't actually talking English at the time she stopped.
No, so you'd say it was a hesitation.
As a hesitation.
Yes, that's right. There are 33 seconds on how to with you, Warren, starting now.
Well, I've never been in favour of it, personally. How to, well, only uncivilized people would, if they could, on various occasions. I've not approved of it. I've tried, I've fought, I've written to my MP how to try in this life when really things are tremendously confusing, and I find it very difficult as an ordinary person, a man in the street, you might say, or just...
Warren Mitchell gave a brilliant demonstration of how to keep going and say nothing at the same time. And he got the extra point for speaking when the whistle went, and I'm afraid we have no more time, so let me give you the final score. G. Marsh, alas, in spite of some excellent moments, finished in 4th place, just behind Warren Mitchell, who on his first appearance was in 3rd place, only 2 points behind Peter Jones, but Peter was 3 points behind this week's winner, who once again was Clement Freud. hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Castles.
We present Clement Freud, Peter Jones, Ian Carmichael and Amy MacDonald in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we are pleased to welcome to the programme this week Ian Carmichael, who's very courageously come along to do battle with our three experienced players. Well, Amy MacDonald comes back after quite a long break. She's not as experienced as the other two, but she knows she can always keep her end up with our two experts. I'm going to ask... Oh, thank you. We're going to ask them to speak, if they can, as usual, on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card. And we'll begin the show this week with Clement Freud. And Clement, the subject is checks. Can you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
Checks is a ministerial pet name for a country house, also known as Checkers to most other people, and it was left to the nation by the Czechoslovakian Society of Friends, who felt that high-ranking government officials ought to have somewhere where...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Absolute rubbish. You're not allowed to say these things about Checkers, which was actually left to the nation by Sir Winston Churchill himself.
It certainly wasn't left by the Czechoslovakian
Society of Friends. No.
I'm surprised it took so long to
second that, Nicholas, because it's always called Checkers, actually.
Would you like to make a joint challenge, then?
Yes.
Yes, all right.
Anyway, Peter got in first. I agree with your challenge, Peter, of deviation. You get a point for that, and you take over the subject of checks, and there are 41 seconds left, starting now.
Well, there are so many different kinds of checks. There are ones that bounce, and others that should never be worn with anything spotted or striped. Or with flowers. And then there are all those people who come from...
Amy MacDonald has challenged you.
That's absolute rubbish.
It may be rubbish, but it wasn't deviating from the subject, Amy,
Oh,
was
yeah,
it?
because in actual fact, you can wear spots with checks.
But that's what he said.
It's terribly fashionable.
That's what he said. And there are
No, he said they should never be worn with spots.
Ah, yes. He said which should never be worn, but a lot of people wear things that should never be worn.
That's what I mean.
I don't think that, in all fairness, Amy, as much as I'd love to give you the subject, he was actually deviating from the subject on the card. So, a wrong challenge, I'm afraid. He keeps the subject, he having gained a point for a wrong challenge, and there are 35 seconds on checks, Peter, starting now.
As I was going to say, because they should be thrown away before they get worn. Otherwise, it looks very tatty and shabby and doesn't give an impression of being well-dressed. Now, all these people who come from Prague and Brno...
Clement Freud has challenged.
A repetition of people.
Yes, there were a few
Yes,
people
I did
before.
repeat people, I admit.
Yes, well done. So Clement Freud has a correct challenge, a point for that, and he takes over the subject again of checks with 23 seconds left, starting now.
There was a time when you used to go to your bank and receive a checkbook, and each single page had a stamp on it, which was worth 2p or cost that sum of money. But those days are completely over. You now ask for a check, and it has nothing, no imprint, just a sort of vague circle which shows that someone, somewhere, paid tax.
Well, in that round, Peter Jones and Clement Freud both scored points, and they're equal in the lead at the end. And, of course, for those who don't already realize it, the whistle tells us 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaks then gains an extra point. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject is buying a second-hand car. Would you talk on that for just 1 minute, starting now?
Well, buying a second-hand car is a very different experience from selling a second-hand car. And if you ever make a purchase of one of these vehicles, and I guarantee drive just down the road to the first place where they're selling them, and you'll find that the people's description of it does not tally in any way with the one given you by the salesman where you bought it, if you know what I mean.
Ian MacDonald has challenged.
Oh, well, it was obvious, wasn't it? You were stuttering all over the place. About to.
He was stuttering.
You were about to. Yes.
Well, I was about to, and
He
I
was about
just...
to.
I
Yes.
lulled you, and you fell for it, you
Oh,
see.
what is it called?
You anticipated.
Yes.
She anticipated my,
She meant you
my
Wasn't it?
hesitation.
No, it was
She did it
hesitation.
beautifully as well, and she gets a point for a correct challenge. And she gets the subject now of buying a second-hand car, Amy. 32 seconds left, starting now.
Now, this is a very dodgy thing to do because you never know who has had the car before. And this is terribly important to know who's been driving this car because there's some very bad drivers on the road.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of because.
Yes. I'm afraid he let it go the second time, but the third time he felt he had to challenge. So I have to give it to him. 20 seconds left, Peter, buying a second-hand car, starting now.
The first thing to do is to take the bonnet.
Ian Carmichael has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, nice to hear from you, Ian.
Well, I know, you see. It's going very, very fast. I'm not used to it at this
I
stage.
know,
I'm really
you're-
not used to it at all.
I know, don't worry, you'll
Right.
still be in there fighting with the others, because they never
Okay.
give any quarter. You may be a newcomer,
Right, sir.
but they won't give you an inch.
Thank you.
So you've got in there with a good challenge, 15 seconds to go. The subject is buying a second-hand car, starting now.
Well, I would have thought that people...
Ian, Clement Freud has challenged.
I'd like to give him an inch.
You almost deserve a point for an amusing challenge. You have given him an inch, and actually given him a point, and which is much better in this game. And there are 13 seconds in for buying a second-hand car, starting now.
Surprised I am that Peter Jones didn't go on for longer than he was threatening to do on this subject, because many moons ago he played a second-hand car salesman in a film with me. Another chap who was playing another second-hand car salesman.
Clement Freud got in just before the whistle, I'm afraid.
Chap.
Yes,
His
second-hand
usual
car
place.
salesman, yes. Oh, dear. Well, we've got to be fair, haven't you? Right, Clement, you very cleverly got in. There's half a second to go. Buying a second-hand car, starting now.
Hello.
So Clement spotted the repetition there and got in just before the whistle, gained an extra point, has a lead over Peter Jones at the end of that round. Amy MacDonald, Ian Carmichael trailing a little. Amy, will you begin? The subject which Ian Messert has thought of, I know specially for you, is why I am lovable. Would you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting
Yes.
now?
Well, the reason I'm lovable is quite simple, really. I'm a very nice person. And not only that, but I'm quite delectable, lovely to look at, with an effervescent personality, and I'm also...
Peter Jones has come to your rescue.
Yes, I felt somehow that Amy was about to hesitate.
Amy, I must let Peter have his challenge, and there are 42 seconds, Peter, for you to tell us now why I am lovable, starting now.
Well, I don't really want this subject because I feel it's so inappropriate. I don't feel that I am. And
Amy MacDonald is challenged.
Yes, well, it's not true, is it? He is lovable.
So you think it's deviation?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, we all think Peter's lovable.
Yes.
So, Amy, I agree with your challenge. You have the subject back again. And you have 34 seconds
Can I
on.
get a point for that?
You get a point as well.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
good.
Oh, yes. You get a point every time you win a challenge.
Oh, yes.
And every time anybody wins one against you.
Yeah.
Have you played the game before?
Yes, but I forgot about that.
Yes. All right. 34 seconds. Why I'm lovable, Amy, starting now.
Another reason is, of course, I'm terribly great fun.
Ian Carmichael is
Well, I
challenged.
think that both of them so far have got hold of the wrong end of the stick. The question that Nicholas Parsons has posed is, why am I so lovable? And it is Nicholas Parsons that is speaking, therefore we should be saying why Mr. Nicholas Parsons is lovable.
All right. It's not exactly a correct challenge, but I would like to hear you talk about it, so...
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
I give you a point.
It's quite unfair to ask someone to talk a whole minute on the subject.
Well, a few seconds will do before he gets challenged. And there are actually 30 seconds to say why I'm lovable starting now.
Well, as Peter Jones has said, really, it'll only take about a third of that time. But frankly, I don't think that you are all that lovable, Nicholas. I don't want to hold it against you. Many friends of mine have said on previous occasions that you are lovable. I know Peter Jones once told me.
Clement Freud has challenged.
Repetition of Peter Jones.
Yes, we can't have him repeated too often, can we? Clement Freud, you have the subject now. There are 16 seconds left. Would you tell us why I am lovable starting now?
I think basically it's my feet. I have these incredibly well-formed toes, adorned with nails which are cut to the quick, very slowly, each Tuesday. And then there's my hair.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hair, it's devious. It's nothing to do with the facts.
You mean his lack of hair could hardly make him lovable?
Nonsense.
Well, no, I don't think so. Yes, I don't want to be personal, but I mean he's...
You are being personal, so you better keep
Oh, I
it.
see, yes. Well,
How do I judge on this, ladies and gentlemen? Whether you think I can't judge. I'm not going to
But
judge
what's
on
the
whether
challenge?
Clement Freud. The challenge is deviation. Whether you're lovable with your particular quantity of hair.
I didn't say that.
But that's what you conveyed, Clement.
No, I said then there is my hair.
And that's what I object to, because there isn't.
And if you say then there is my hair, and the subject is why I'm lovable, we must connect the two. Otherwise, you're admitting that you're being devious.
Which no longer grows from my scalp.
Well, it's still got to do with the fact why I'm lovable. I'm going to put this to the audience because I refuse to judge it. If you agree with Peter Jones's challenge and you think that Clement Freud is not particularly lovable with or without a great quantity of hair, would you all cheer? If you disagree with his challenge and think that Clement Freud is lovable, would you all boo? And will you all do it together now? I think Clement Freud is so lovable. Everyone in the audience, they're terrified of him, aren't they? They all think you're lovable, Clement, and you have a point from the audience, and you have 2 seconds to go on why I'm lovable starting now.
My left knee.
Well, Clement Freud's lovable qualities kept him going, so he increased his lead at the end of that round. Ian Carmichael, your turn to begin, and the subject is Stockholm. Would you talk about Stockholm for 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
As most people know, Stockholm is the capital of Sweden. Now, in the middle 50s, I was engaged by the J. Arthur Rank Organization to make films for them, and on one occasion I was taken over to Stockholm with a party of 6 other actors and actresses. On arrival, we were taken to a hotel where we changed, had a bath, and went down to dinner. When I got there, I ordered oysters because I thought they sounded rather nice. They were the largest ones that I had ever had.
Clement Freud has challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
Oysters don't talk.
They sounded rather nice.
How can they sound
They
nice?
couldn't. No, they could smell or feel or taste, but they could hardly sound. There are 28 seconds on Stockholm with you, Clement, starting now.
As most of you know, Stockholm is the capital city of Sweden.
Amy MacDonald has challenged.
Repetition.
Of what?
Because
Ian
Ian's
said
already
that.
said
Yes, but
all
you,
that.
I know, but you can repeat what anybody else has said, but you are not allowed to repeat what you say yourself.
But that'd be terribly
easy.
boring if somebody speaks for 30 minutes on something and then the next for 30
Well,
seconds.
you could
and
if you
then the
wanted
next,
to.
The next person repeats for another 30
It would be
seconds.
terribly boring, but there's nothing in the rules to say that you can't do it, and nobody's yet done it. It would be very amusing if they tried. It would be very difficult to repeat exactly what someone else has said, wouldn't it? There are 24 seconds, Clement. Stockholm with you, starting now.
I was privileged some years ago to be sent over there by a television company in order to do a program on Stockholm British Week. And it was an extraordinary experience because the only thing you saw which was remotely English, Welsh, Scottish or Irish were old humbugs and licorice all sorts, which is really a...
Oh, well, Clement, you increased your lead at the end of the round, and Peter Jones is going to begin the next round, and the subject is quotations. Peter, will you quote or speak on quotations? 60 seconds, starting now.
Life is hard, women are difficult, children easy to make, courage, my friend. That is one of my favorite quotations. I can see it's gone very well with you. And another one that my uncle used to quote in moments of dire distress. He used to mutter, "Farewell, baskets, the grapes are gathered." I don't know quite who it was who first said it. But there are other famous quotations, like Oscar Wilde, when he was dying on his deathbed, he looked round at the hideous wallpaper in these impoverished lodgings and said, "One of us will have to go." And I often quote these famous personalities of the past because it gives one a certain cachet. Even if one hasn't read all the books that famous authors have written, one can learn some of the quotations. Thought they'd all gone home.
we were hanging on every word and every second because we could feel you slowly and sort of losing grip of the subject, and we wondered whether you would hold on for the full 60 seconds. Did you feel that yourself?
Yes, there was a sadistic element I felt in your attitude.
Well, you got an extra point for starting with the
so
subject and finishing with the subject, and first person to do it for quite some time, Peter. Congratulations. You've increased your lead. No, you haven't got a lead. You've increased your position. You were in second place, and you're still in second place. And Freud's still in the lead.
A lot of effort for nothing, it seems to me.
It might pay off later.
Ah, good.
Amy
all right.
MacDonald and Ian Carmichael are a little way behind. Amy MacDonald, will you begin the next round? The subject is my scene. Would you talk on my scene in 60 seconds, starting now?
My scene was the most important scene in the whole play. That's the reason they asked me to do it, you see. And I came through the French windows out onto the garden. And there, sitting on a tree trunk, was my lover. I was wearing a long white dress. I carried a yellow parasol. I had frills round my neck, and my hair was up with a thing on top. And the reason for the scene was that
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, she said, and that kind of leads me to feel that she was hesitating.
Yes, having described
I don't think it was entirely intentional.
No, I wish I'd seen the scene, because having described it, she got out there with a picture. You know what it was all about, did she?
Exactly, right, yes.
I would think it would be well, Peter, you've challenged correctly. You take over the subject, and there are 27 seconds on my scene, starting now.
Just to try and test your theory, my scene involved this lover sitting on a tree trunk, and I was wearing something on my head and a pink parasol, and he was sitting there without any,
Amy MacDonald challenged her.
That was hesitation.
Oh, it definitely was.
Oh,
Yes.
definitely was.
That's why people don't repeat whatever someone else has said. It's not easy, is it?
No, it isn't. No.
Amy, you have the subject back. There are 11 seconds. My scene, starting now.
The reason for the scene, of course, was that my lover...
Clement Freud has challenged.
Repetition.
Yes, she's still...
She said before.
Yes. She still can't remember what her scene was. Did you remember your lines ever in that scene?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
I was very good, actually.
At forgetting your lines?
No.
Oh. 6 seconds, Clement. My scene, starting now.
Nice.
Peter Jones has
hesitation.
5 seconds, Peter, for you on my scene, starting now.
Once in the garden, I threw my arms around her.
Were you in the same scene, by any chance?
No, unfortunately, we weren't. No, we weren't even in the same play. I
but
wonder sometimes if we're in the same profession.
Ian Carmichael, will you begin the next round? The subject is what I said as I left the house. Can you remember or just talk about the subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
I don't know what time I shall be back, is a thing that many people say. Sometimes they go further than that, and they say, I shall not be coming back at all, ever.
Amy MacDonald is challenged.
Deviation, because the actual question is what I said, not what anybody else said.
Well, that's quite a good challenge. He also...
People say... And,
Oh, I think she wins.
They do that.
Oh, good. You helped me out of a difficult spot because you weren't truthfully. Anyway, Amy, you have a point for a correct challenge, and you've got now 5 beautiful rounded points. So I didn't...
Which is a novelty in itself, isn't it?
Oh, dear me, that was just unconscious association, obviously. Amy, you have the subject, and you have, which is what I said as I left the house, and stop shaking your message. That's better. Now you start at the clock. There are 46 seconds, Amy, starting now.
What I said when I left the house was really absolutely nothing, because you see there was nobody there to say anything to. So if I had, there would have been something a bit strange wrong with me. Although sometimes I do speak to myself. Not very often, and never, almost never... Oh!
Peter challenged.
Well, there was a bit of everything there, I think.
You're right. Amy, may I give you a little tip? The thing is that always keep going, even if you know you've made a mistake, because sometimes these 3 chaps can be very gallant and allow you to keep going. Yeah. Sometimes they allow each other to keep going, you know. So never draw attention, otherwise you're bound to lose. No. So Peter got in there, and there are 27 seconds on what I said as I left the house, Peter, starting now.
It was the workhouse, and I told them exactly what they could do with their Christmas pudding. And as I slammed the gate, walking down the road with my whole belongings in a little old handkerchief hung on the end of a stick, I toddled off into the distance, hoping that somebody would give me a round of applause, but alas, they were few and far between. I went past another place further along.
That was a fine bit of gamesmanship. You were drying up, so you asked for a round of applause from the audience.
No.
They were they didn't play your game. They waited, and you nearly didn't get it to the end. Anyway, Peter, you've increased your position. The number of points, I should say. You're in the same position, but you're back to where you were time ago, 1 point behind Clement Freud.
I'm always 1 point behind Clement Freud.
No, a little while ago you were 6 points behind him.
Oh. Well, I mean, that's the best I ever get.
No. Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject is reason. Can you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
Oh, how I wish Kenneth Williams were here, because it would be a wonderful subject for him to discuss the age of reason, which started, I suppose, with Descartes, and then Dr. Johnson had something to do with it, and all these people did not accept the teachings of the church and wrote scientific...
Amy MacDonald has challenged.
Hesitation,
Yes, he did.
Yes, I did hesitate.
Yes, you did. Yes, I was just
the
the way you
point
said that rather appealed to me, actually, Amy. There are 41 seconds left on reason, Amy, with you starting now.
There is a reason for practically anything in this world. The reason flowers grow is because the rain falls down. The reason grass grows is because more rain.
Maybe in the same spot for rain.
Clement, you challenged.
Rain, was it?
You have a point for a correct challenge and 27 seconds on reason starting now.
One of the most extraordinary pieces of failure to see reason was perpetrated in the breathalyzer legislation, because anyone who had any idea of what it was about would have appreciated not that 10% of the population drink and drive, but that 90 out of 100 do so when they're sober. So what should have happened is... Can I just go on?
Yes, must hear.
I mean, what really should have happened was the government should have looked at this and realized that 90% of all accidents are caused by sober drivers. And had they banned sober drivers from the road, this would have effectively reduced accidents by 90% and kept the road safe for us 10% drunken drivers.
Why why you applaud such devious thoughts. But anyway, you kept going. You have a point for speaking where the whistle went. You've increased your position. I'm afraid we have no more time. So it remains for me to tell you the final situation. Ian Carmichael coming to play the game for the first time, doing extremely well, but alas, could only finish in 4th place. A little way behind, Amy MacDonald, coming back after a long absence, went through the game with flying colours, but her colours only brought her into 3rd place. Peter Jones, who gained his colours and his spurs and everything else a long time ago, did very, very well, but didn't quite beat our winner, who once again was Clement Freud. We hope that you enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones, and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much indeed. And how nice to welcome such a warm, friendly audience to this recording of Just a Minute. We hope you're going to enjoy it as you hear our 4 keen competitors talk for just a minute on some unlikely subject without hesitation and without repetition and without deviating from the subject on the card if they can. And we'll begin the show this week with Derek Nimmo. And Derek, the subject is keeping prices down. Everybody's thinking about it and talking about it, and can you talk for 60 seconds without repeating and hesitating and all the rest, starting now?
Well, having been born in Liverpool and spent a lot of my time visiting North Wales, I must say I've always been terribly keen on keeping prices down. I've always had this sort of phobia against the Welsh, particularly the Joneses and the Williamses, who ought to be kept down with the prices. And I do think the thumb of the English should be heavily pressed upon them so they can't come over the border. They ought to present passports. How dare they let people like that fellow over there work in the West End? A Welshman who, I feel, is waving his red flag, that awful dragon.
You have actually been challenged by the Welshman over there.
I'm not going to sit here and listen to that diatribe. That's a disgrace. And deviation.
Why is it devious?
It has nothing to do with keeping the prices down. It was a filthy imputation about my character. And
yes, actually, when he was saying about keeping the prices down along with all the other Welshmen, he wasn't deviating the subject of the card, but once he got on to keeping you down, then he was deviating. And so, Kenneth, I agree with your challenge. So you gain a point for a correct challenge and, of course, the subject, and you have 37 seconds left, starting now.
In the Mediterranean basin, it's fashionable for people to say, I'll give you X amount, not the asking price, and in the process, they knock each other down. This is a term used. It doesn't mean physically they actually bash each other. It simply means they offer a price they consider reasonable, and the other man bargains with them over this. Now, I think people should do this when they go to British Railways and say, I will.
Well, Kenneth, at the end of that round, you were the only one who scored any points. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round, please? The subject, when I sat down at the piano, starting now.
Well, I've actually given up the piano now, but when I first sat down, I was taught by a tall, well-built lady, charming woman, and she had what at that time was described as an ample bosom. I suppose nowadays you'd say she was about 48. But I sat on my stool. She sat immediately behind me.
Kenneth Williams as judge.
Of the word sat.
Yes, there were 2 sats. You were both sat, and unfortunately you were...
Well, there were 2 of us, you see.
Yes.
Who's on the card, Nick?
but on this...
It's on the card, Nick.
Oh, actually, it's on the card when I sat down at the piano. Oh, what a pity, yes.
So that's the wrong challenge. I get an extra point and go on. Is that right?
No. You get 1 point for a wrong challenge and you keep going, and there are 30... Your friends on the opposite side helped you, not...
Yes, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, 35 seconds on when I sat down at the piano, starting now.
And I used to sit there, and I couldn't move my head to right or left without, in the corner of one eye or the other, catching sight of one of these bosoms.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
Devious. They couldn't have been bosoms on both sides of it.
I think that's a very good challenge, whichever way he looked. They must, I presume, have both been the same size, so he must have only seen one bosom. I don't think he'd have seen
one or other, yes. They were here. If there's an built lady in the audience, that lady in the 5th row, if you wouldn't mind, we can give a demonstration.
I'm completely confused now, because when you were talking about the lady's bosoms, you put your hand up to your ears.
Well, that's where they were. She was sitting behind me, leaning forward, and of course I was leaning back.
Why was she sitting behind you? It's very
I think the whole thing
kinky.
is got their hands underneath here trying to show me what to do. And of course my 10-year-old mind was not on the music.
I think her bosoms were.
Yes.
I think the whole thing's getting so devious that I think in every respect you deserve to lose the subject. Kenneth gets a point for a correct challenge, and he has 20 seconds left on when I sat down at the piano, starting now.
When I sat down at the piano, I was a complete coward because of the gentleman in the front row who was smoking like a chimney. I thought at the time, how can anyone retain their presence of mind under these circumstances?
Sheila Hancock has
I've
challenged.
got a challenge. It isn't when he sat down at the piano, this.
Well, he said when he sat down at the piano.
Well, there's not a piano in the room, and he's talking about the gentleman in the front row. So therefore, when he sat down in the piano...
Not the gentleman in this front row. I said when I first played the piano, the gentleman in the front row there, dear.
Ah.
You had an audience the first time you played?
Of course I did.
But not the second.
Kenneth has justified himself. He has 4 seconds left with the subject. When I sat down at the piano, Kenneth, starting now.
The number that I was supposed to play was Ramona.
Well, Kenneth, you were speaking then when the whistle went. You gained that extra point. You have increased your lead. You've not only jumped into the lead, you've jumped further into the lead. And we're going to hear from you again because we want you to begin the next round. You haven't begun a round yet. The happiest day of my life. When you leapt into the lead, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, would you talk on the subject starting now?
It's a happy choice indeed that I should be given this to discuss, because it was something I looked forward to with appalling apprehension for 3 miserable years. I lay in an army bed thinking, when will I ever get demobbed? And then it happened in an Aldershot barracks. I got so tired it wasn't true. And stuck 2 fingers up at NCOs and things, and I didn't give a finger. What happened?
Sheila Hancock challenge. That's what
Hesitation, or if it wasn't hesitation, it might have been deviation.
He hesitated in order not to be devious.
In order not to deviate.
I think that's a good challenge, Sheila. And you have 26 seconds on the happiest day of my life starting now.
I find it difficult to say because I've had so many.
Deviation. She finds it difficult to say. Why don't you shut up and give it back to me? I want to go on about when I was demobbed.
I know you do, but it was not a correct challenge because she didn't deviate from the subject. So she has 24 seconds on the happiest day of my life, Sheila, starting now.
Every time I thought things were going to be the happiest day of my life, they weren't, because I think if you expect them to be, then they are a failure. For instance...
Deviation. She's not discussing the happiest day of her life. She's discussing the fact that it never comes.
I might have got round to telling you what it was eventually.
We're not interested in what you got round to, dear. You'll get round to a lot of things when you leave this studio. We're not going to be there to hear it, are we?
Well, it's very difficult to think of the happiest day of your life just like that.
Yes, it's quite true. And
I mean, who could look back on all the years
subject-
I've had and say, what's the happiest day, just like that?
Yes, and of course the subject on the card is the happiest day of my life, and you were getting round to it, I think.
I might have thought of it
Yes,
eventually,
you might have thought of it, yes. So, Sheila, you have 16 seconds left on the subject starting now.
It wasn't the day I got married because I was covered in acne and very embarrassed about the whole procedure.
Deviation. She's discussing what wasn't the happiest day of her life. That
Well, I'm
isn't the
sorting
subject.
it out, you see.
Well, all right, Sheila, I think you've had long enough to sort it
Yes,
out. I'm going to
all
give it
right.
to Kenneth this time. Kenneth, you have a point now for a correct challenge with 11 seconds left starting now.
I was given this special D mob suit, of which I was extremely proud, and when I got to Waterloo, in my excitement, left it behind. I rushed back to the lost property office and I said, have you seen a...
Although everybody's speaking up well in the programme, from the point of view of winning points, it's becoming a one-man show this week. Kenneth Williams, way out in the lead. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round? The subject, this and that. 60 seconds starting now.
This and that is neither here nor there. But I suppose I would really rather talk about that than this. For instance, in this country today, do you know that we're losing 10,000 miles of hedgerow every year due to crop spraying? Isn't this a frightful thing with a consequent loss of flora and fauna? Each 10 years, we lose an area of ground under concrete the size of Hertfordshire. This is a terrifying prospect, and you all sit here tonight so complacently, gazing at me with bovine expressions, for our countryside has been taken away from us. The birds are no longer flying. Those that are... Who's buzzed me? Who buzzed me?
No, I'm sorry, you were buzzed.
I'm so sorry.
I was so carried away with my bovine eyes upon you that, you know, I was so full of emotion and distress at what you were saying. Peter Jones, you challenged a long time. I didn't hear you, by the way, but you like
these remarks about the audience. They may be complacent, I don't know, but they're certainly not sitting there with bovine expressions. I think that's a gratuitous insult to a charming bunch of people who certainly... certainly have been animated while I've been speaking. Though their expressions do change slightly when Nimmo is on.
I think the audience applause shows that whatever decision I made, if it was to go against you, they would not stand for it. So we give you the benefit of the doubt, Peter. Correct challenge, a point, and 25 seconds left on this and that starting now.
So I think you should take Nimmo's address and send sixpence to the appeal fund, the address of which I will give you after the programme is over. And if you can, do your little bit towards allowing the hedgerows to flourish. Take some seeds in your pocket when you walk a country lane.
So this and that kept Peter going, and he gained the point for speaking when the whistle went, and he has moved into second place, equal with Sheila Hancock, but they are definitely trailing behind our leader, who is still Kenneth Williams. All right, Sheila, will you take the next round, please? And the subject is tails. We've heard plenty of them in this programme over the years, but will you talk on that now for 60 seconds, beginning now?
Most animals have these things. Even the human being has the relic of one, known as the coccyx, which is at the base of your spine.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation.
No, it's absolutely correct.
True.
It wasn't, that is, she was being
It's a little
perfectly
tiny
medically correct. And there are 53 seconds left to continue talking about tails. If you haven't got a coccyx, bad luck, Derek. Sheila, tails, 53 seconds, starting...
After the programme, I will show Derek where it is, because obviously he is very ignorant. There are long ones on animals, I mean, and furry ones, and sleek the others, and some cats, like Manxes, haven't got any.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Not only a hesitation, it seemed a kind of silent cry for help.
Well answered, Peter. You have a point for your cry, for answering the cry, and you have 43 seconds on tails, starting now.
What about those imitation balls of fluff that are worn by bunnies at certain clubs? That seems an extraordinary habit to me. Do any...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so. Derek, you have the subject now of tales, and there are 23 seconds left starting now.
Well, my favourite one is about the three bears. I like it particularly, and I read it to myself every night before I go to bed. I awfully like the bit when they have their porridge. That always makes me laugh. And when the little chair falls down, and then they go upstairs to bed. Who rang?
He did another one of those hesitations. He said, when the little chair fells down.
Oh, Sheila, you're being pedantic.
Well, not only that, but I don't believe he reads the Three Bears every night.
Ah,
before
that
he
would have
goes
been
to
a
bed.
correct challenge.
Well, I didn't like to say that because you might ask me to prove it or something.
That I would have upheld, but I can't uphold the other challenge, so Derek keeps the subject. 10 seconds left. Tales, Derek, starting now.
When I go on holiday, I always take with me something called extra tail. Now, this is a little aerosol that you squirt yourself. It's really designed for horses, and it hasn't made me grow one yet, but it does prove that no flies on me.
I don't know what you were talking about, Derek, but you kept going without a challenge, and you were speaking when the whistle went. You gained an extra point. You're all creeping up on Kenneth, so Kenneth, watch out, and you'll begin the next round for us. Joan of Arc. 60 seconds starting now.
Well, I think Shaw describes her as the first real nationalist in Europe, and I think that's a fair enough description. She certainly did cause an awful lot of trouble by setting all the French, be it they from Lorraine or Burgundy, to unite and throw out the English, who were under, of course, the Duke of Bedford, and he
Derek Nimmo has challenged. Why?
Well, deviation. I mean, the Burgundians handed her over to the English, so therefore she didn't call the Burgundians to unite with them.
Would unite with whom?
The English.
Well, she said she caused the Burgundians, all the French, to unite against the English. In fact, when she was taken in Compiègne, she was taken by the Burgundians, who handed her over to the English, and that's why she was burnt. So what I'm saying, what Mr. Williams, I think his name is, said is rubbish.
I think what he was argument, she asked the Burgundians to join and make one united France. The fact that they didn't do so and handed it over to the English is neither here nor there. It doesn't invalidate the fact that she asked them.
She asked them, and she endeavoured. She endeavoured to unite the French.
I don't think you can argue on some technical point
I
like that.
quite agree.
Just coming from someone who's sworn before all of us that he recites the Three Bears before he goes to bed every night.
Thank you, Peter. I was going to say exactly the same myself. But on a more serious note, I was going to say that Kenneth was endeavouring, under very difficult circumstances, to keep going without hesitation, repetition, or deviation, to say that Joan of Arc did endeavour to unite the French. And that's what she certainly achieved in the end. Joan of Arc is still with you, 60 seconds starting now.
She maintained throughout her trial that she heard the voices giving her instructions. She said she heard St. Michael.
Nimmo has challenged.
Edition of her.
Yes, I'm afraid I must be accurate on this one and say you have 37 seconds for Joan of Arc. Derek, starting
Well, of course,
now.
she started off life as a barmaid, quite a successful one, I believe, and she used to go out into the woods under the oak trees, and that's where she first heard her voices calling to her. And then she reported it back, and then they would say she was taken along eventually to Kenneth Williams, who was terribly impressed by her and thought that perhaps she could save France. And because he liked champagne, she agreed to have Kenneth Williams crowned in rings.
Peter Jones has challenged.
A repetition of Kenneth Williams.
A very good challenge.
Laughing.
Kenneth Williams was repeated, so, and we can, on occasions, have too much of Kenneth Williams. You repeat his name, you gain a point, Peter, and 15 seconds on Joan of Arc starting now.
Was actually burned at the stake. What an appalling way to go.
Kenneth
This
Williams
is light
challenged.
entertainment. We don't want to be being burned at the stake. I mean, it's disgusting.
Well, I
What's
didn't
your challenge,
suggest
then?
Joan of Arc.
Invalid. It's the whole thing is deviation.
No, is he perfectly correct what he said, so he has a point and 10 seconds on the subject of Joan of Arc, Peter, starting now.
And I dare say other people were as well.
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I did hesitate.
He giggled, but all right, you hesitated. 7 seconds on Joan of Arc, Derek, starting now.
And as she was there, on this great pile of fire, she picked up 2 bits of wood, held them
Sheila
together.
Hancock has challenged. Why?
Is it true to say she was on a great pile of fire?
It's not true, but that was the impression that one would gain.
There were all these faggots burning.
And
Go on, then.
if you read the Three Bears every night, how else could you describe
Exactly.
all the faggots burning?
It does limit
Great
your
pile of
vocabulary,
fire.
I admit.
3
Go on.
seconds on Joan of Arc, Derek, starting now.
She
picked up these two charred bits
Kenneth
of
wins
wood.
the challenge.
Repetition, he said she picked up.
picked up before, yes. So, Kenneth, you have another point in 2 seconds, and Joan of Arc starting now.
I don't know why they canonised her at all, because as far as I'm concerned, she was a great loser.
Well, Kenneth gained an extra point then for speaking when the whistle went. He's still in the lead, but Derek and Peter are hot on his heels, and Sheila's trailing just a little. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round, please? Fool's Paradise. That is the subject that Ian has thought up for you, and will you talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, I suppose it might be that when a jester dies and goes to heaven, then paradise for him would be an audience of people who are permanently in paroxysms and roaring with laughter, applauding, clapping, cheering, permanently and forever.
Derek Nimmo has
Repetition
challenged.
of permanently.
Yes, you said it before, didn't you? 38 seconds on Fool's Paradise with you, Derek, starting now.
Well, of course, all the team of Just a Minute are living in a fool's paradise today because Clement Freud's away. We all imagine he's gone for good, but any moment he'll return, and there'll be that great, dreary, gloomy, bearded, egg-ridden face looking at us.
Kenneth wins a challenge.
Deviation, he's not great dreary, he's a dear, loving friend of mine. Beloved of chums, and someone whom I adore to embrace and put my arm around and say, welcome back.
That's one of these things. When personalities come into it, I cannot be the final judge.
You know he's not a great drear. You're going to sit there and read him a great drear? Is that what you're doing?
After some of the things he said to me, I'm quite prepared to say it, but I'm going to let the audience...
If you go on record as supporting that, you're in trouble.
We're all in trouble today. Shall I give it to Kenneth?
Yes.
All right, but Kenneth's in the lead. Shall I give it to Derek? We're playing the game in quite a different way today, aren't we? Kenneth Williams, Fool's Paradise, 24 seconds left, starting now.
Well, as Alexander Pope rightly put it,
not again.
fly to altars, there they'll talk you dead. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And indeed, this is a fool's paradise where they do exactly that. And why? Because of an appalling and abysmal ignorance which no enlightened mind could
You had the audience living in a fool's paradise then. But you hoodwinked them, kept going, and you weren't challenged. You gained a point for speaking the whistle went. You've increased your lead at the end of that round. And Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round?
Yeah.
The subject is getting a little extra. Would you talk for 60 seconds on that, starting now?
Well, I always believe in going abroad, getting...
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
No hesitation.
Yes, he was trying to bring in all the other subjects we'd had and fortunately failed, and Kenneth got in first. And there are 55 seconds on getting a little extra, Kenneth, starting now.
One of the ways I do this with an almost empty honey jar is to put it on its side and leave it for a bit, and in a few hours you find when you come back there is a little extra you didn't think was there, but there it is, dripping down the side of the container in this rather lugubrious fashion, but even so very pleasant, because put your tongue, there's this incredible sweetness which the taste buds embrace, and thus losing myself in almost oblivion of deliciousness, you say, oh, I had a little extra. I've also done it with a bottle of wine by putting that upside down into a glass, and thus enabling myself to enjoy again, to savour something from, shall we say, the Moselle region, or shall we say,
Peter Jones has challenged you.
Repetition, shall we say?
Yes, shall we say? Yes. Peter, you have a point for a correct challenge. And 3 seconds left on... And with 3 seconds, you really are going to get a little extra, Peter, starting now.
A little extra is a very small crowd artist.
He's actually quite
I think that
right.
remark
Very
almost
good.
deserves a bonus point.
It was worth the 3 seconds.
Yes, it was worth. Anyway, you got the point for speaking when the whistle went. We do actually have no more time, which is a great pity because we've enjoyed ourselves. Audience, have you enjoyed yourselves? I hope you'll come again. Sheila Hancock, this week you finished in 4th place. You were just beaten last time you were with us by Derek Nimmo. But you did very well, didn't you? We loved having you, loved hearing from you. Peter Jones, you finished in 3rd place. You made a sudden leap forward there. Only 1 point behind Derek Nimmo, who did terribly well. And was very generous, too, on one or two occasions. But none of you this week, none of you could touch Kenneth Williams, who was way out in the front. An undisputed champion, Kenneth Williams. Well, I think, listeners, you would say from the audience reaction, that is what you call a popular win. And we hope you've enjoyed the programme. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett.
Present Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, Peter Jones, and David Jacobs in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, we're delighted to welcome back after a few weeks' break, David Jacobs, who's come back to do battle once again. Against Derek, Pete and Clement, who have played the game for 2 or 3 years. Peter, I'm just remind you, of course, they're going to speak again, if they can, on some subject that I will give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card in front of me. And we'll begin the show this week with Peter Jones. And the subject is A Night on the Tiles. Would you talk about it now? 60 seconds, starting now.
Oh, it's a delightful old phrase, Edwardian, even Victorian, perhaps, describing, as it does, probably, the kind of picture that Donald McGill drew for those postcards of fat, beery-faced men leaning against bending lampposts and possibly wearing old-fashioned evening dress.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition, possibly.
Derek Nimmo had a correct challenge, so he gains a point and he takes over the subject, and there are 42 seconds, Derek, for A Night on the Tiles, starting now.
I think A Night on the Tiles will be frightfully uncomfortable. Can you imagine? I went up the staircase, up to the drain pipe, onto the roof.
David Jacobs.
Not up and again.
Yes, up there, isn't it?
Yeah, so we give him the up and a point, and 34 seconds, A Night on the Tiles, David, starting now.
My cat is a very large blue Persian called Smokey, with large marks.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Large.
Yes, everything was too large in his head.
It is a very large cat.
There are 28 seconds, A Night on the Tiles, Derek, starting now.
Emerging from the skylight with one's pillow, a blanket, and a nice, clean sheet, I lie on the tiles, looking up at the cloudless...
Clement
not
Freud
up
is challenge. What is your challenge?
Another up.
Yes. 18 seconds for you, Clement, on A Night on the Tiles, starting now.
I once saw in Helsinki a game of human chess in which there were large marble tiles on the ground and the knights and rooks and kings.
David Jacobs has challenged.
I thought he was hesitating rather a lot.
I would agree and give you the subject back and say you have 3 seconds, A Night on the Tiles, David, starting now.
The roof of the house is...
At the end of the first round, David Jacobs has a lead over the others. And Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is My Best Joke. 60 seconds, starting now.
My best joke involves an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman, a Welshman, a Catholic, a nonconformist, 2 Jews, an alligator.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of Jews. Either repetition or anti-Semitism.
Or discrimination. Derek, I tell you what we'll do. The audience enjoyed it so much, we give you one of those bonus points I occasionally award for a clever challenge, but as he didn't deviate, he should keep the subject. So there are 46 seconds on my best joke, Clement, starting now.
And the third man from the left said to his friend, would you, given the chance, take the bathroom plug, place it on the back of a tortoise, and remove yourself to Penzance?
David Jacobs has challenged.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm awfully sorry about this, Clement, but I have actually, in honesty, heard you tell a very much better story. I get pretty good.
I think, in all honesty, I've got to admit, I never tell the same joke twice, and this is currently my best joke.
You see, there's always an answer to justify everything, isn't there? Which gives the chairman an impossible situation.
Just don't tell us any of the not-so-good jokes.
I think I'll do what I did before. Give David Jacobs a point for a good challenge. All right, then give him the subject as well with the point. 34 seconds, David. My best joke starting now.
Peter Murray, who is a joke himself, whose vital statistics, because he's played so many gramophone records, are 33, 45, and 78, and that's only his head, was once seen bending over Mick Jagger, who was lying at the back of the stage.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation.
This is my best joke. What are you talking about?
Will you justify your deviation?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
If your mind's as bad as that...
It isn't. I was trying to be erased from the programme.
The audience didn't laugh, so they don't know what's going on in your mind. Only you know that, and you're laughing at your own filthy joke, and we'll let David Jacobs have a point for a wrong challenge and say there are 16 seconds left. My best joke, David, starting now.
His head was on the...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
That's only his head, repetition of head.
Yes, head, yes. You gave the vital statistics to his head a while ago.
Quite right.
Yes, I did. 14 seconds, Derek. My best joke starting now.
Into this little church in Ireland came from a circus.
Clement Freud has challenged.
Hesitation.
I would agree, Clement. You have 9 seconds on my best joke starting now.
So the bus conductor said there are no more tuppenny tickets, and the woman explained...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
It's not... We've already established his best joke. It's all about this tortoise.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with the tortoise. Now we're talking about... So it's a different subject.
And I think I would agree with you this is a different joke, and so... You have 3 seconds now on my best joke starting now.
2 monks passing one another street.
Clement Freud is challenged.
It didn't seem like the same joke he started on.
No, it didn't sound like the same
Well, it
joke.
was church. I only got as far as the church.
You said 2 monks going down the street. The other
Well,
time...
they were outside the church. They were just coming in. If you let me tell it. I mean...
You said a church.
Yes. Anyway, Nicholas, it was a repetition of monks, wasn't it? If he can't have 2 Jews, you can't have 2
No,
monks.
priest. The priest was inside. The monks came in to see him.
Yeah, but he couldn't have 2 Jews.
And I'll tell you the end of it. As they come in...
Wasn't the same joke.
Wasn't the same
Same joke.
You like I'll put it to the audience?
Oh, well, just let me finish the joke.
Do you wish I put it to the audience? Would you like it put to the audience?
Put it to the audience.
All right. I think it was. I think it was a different joke. If you think it was, will you cheer? And if you think it wasn't the same joke, in other words, you're on Derek Nimmo's side, you boo, and all do it together now. Good, you are unprejudiced lot, aren't you? Derek Nimmo, they're on your side. You have a point and 2 seconds on my best joke starting now.
My best joke will be very well received if I was allowed to tell it.
Well, there's a little partisanship from the part of the audience there. It helped Derek Nimmo to gain a number of points in that round.
I thought all the audience... I'm sorry
Well,
if I
most
was
of them
wrong.
anyway. And so he has a lead at the end of that round. Well done. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round? The subject, amusing guest. That's rather apt, isn't it? Since the subject has come up. And would you talk on it 60 seconds starting now?
Very important to have amusing guests. We have one tonight on this programme, Mr. David Jacobs, and how pleasant it is for us to have him here as a victim. See, normally he lauds it on that radio programme that he has, and he shouts at everybody and bosses everybody.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition programme.
Yes, and I don't think he shouts and bosses.
I like programmes to be repeated, but in this instance I felt it was.
Peter, you have a point on the subject. 45 seconds. Amusing guests starting now.
I could remember thousands of them, and I'll try and give you their names. George...
Oh, Peter, you didn't try hard enough.
No.
Clement Freud's challenge first.
The idea rather amused me, and I got carried away by it.
39 seconds, Clement, on amusing guests starting now.
I've always found that a dinner party is the best way of amusing guests, is to get a poached egg and balance it on your head while you serve champagne cocktails, red wine, and white liqueurs to those assembled in your sitting room or wherever it is that you are producing the celebrities to which you've invited them. But there are people who consider truffles are much more suitable. A friend of mine called Wilfred R. Henson...
Peter Jones is challenged.
I don't believe there are any people who believe that it's better to put truffles on your head than poached eggs.
Truffles are much cleaner.
Utterly ridiculous. I quite agree, Peter. I don't know what he was talking about. And
We're talking about the comparative merits of truffles and poached eggs.
You were. We're talking about the
head.
subject of amusing guests, and that is the subject, so Peter has a point, and he has 12 seconds starting now.
And if you can balance something on your nose as you serve these various sweetmeats and other delicacies, savouries, bits of things on biscuits, crackers, toast...
So Peter Jones got some points in that round and he's moved forward. At last he's still in fourth place. David Jacobs and Clement Freud are equal in second place, both 2 points behind Derek Nimmo. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject, New York. Would you talk about it? 60 seconds, starting now.
I happen to like New York. It's got a very bad press lately, but I think it's a great pity that they haven't publicized some of the marvelous things about the city, like the Free Theatre in Central Park, where great stars like George C. Scott and Stacey
Clement
Keach...
Freud is challenged.
Repetition of like.
Yes, I'm afraid there were. I think it was a tough challenge, but there we are, Clement. You have the subject, and you have 43 seconds on New York, starting now.
One of the most extraordinary things about New York is that people say, beware of muggers. And when I was last there, I did, in fact, heed this advice very carefully.
Peter Jones, the challenge.
Repetition of advice.
No.
Wasn't it? Didn't you repeat advice?
No.
Oh, it must be an echo.
Sorry, Peter. 34 seconds, Clement.
Walking down 6th Avenue at dusk, I brushed against a man and suddenly thought, my wallet. I put my hand inside my jacket pocket and discovered the receptacle of my notes had in fact disappeared, followed the person hurrying away, grasped him by the neck and said, give it to me. And he was awfully decent and returned it. I went to my hotel, looked at it, and found that it was his and not mine. And then, looking through another suit, I discovered...
Well, whether it was true or not, Clement, it's a very good story, and it also gained you points.
Then I found my own wallet in the suit I'd worn the previous day.
So you never
and in
lost
fact,
it
the
all?
man thought that I was mugging him. It's a very strange
Better
thing.
story.
Yes.
And you begin the next round, Clement. What I would say if I were not on the air. That's a good subject that Ian's thought of, isn't it? Clement, will you talk on it? 60 seconds, starting now.
If you're wanting for to shine in the high aesthetic climb, as a man of culture rare, you must set up...
Derek Nimmo has challenged. Yes, there was.
Oh, no, this is what I would do if I were not on the air. You're absolutely allowed to repeat
But at the present
yourself.
moment, you are on the air playing Just a
I
Minute,
see.
talking about what I would say if I were not on the air, so that was a hesitation.
Neatly thought out.
Yeah. 52 seconds on what I would say if I were not on the air, Derek, starting now.
What I would say if I was not on the air.
Clement Freud.
If I were not on the air, it's a deviation.
What I would say if I were not on the air.
And he said, if I was not.
I did, yes, I did.
Yes, so Derek, Clement, you have another point, and there are 47 seconds on what I would say if I were not on the air, starting now.
What I would say if I were not on the air would be practically nothing at all, because it would be so totally worthless. No check would come at the end of the week. No director would wave at me requesting me to finish my monologue. Derek Nimmo, David Jacobs, Peter Jones would ignore me totally because we would not be panelists together on this great game of Just a Minute, which goes out on Thursdays and Tuesdays, and as often as not in New Zealand, Cyprus, and South Africa, let alone Australia, is repeated at regular intervals.
David Jacobs is challenged.
I think he said repeated. Did he say repeated?
Repeated on
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Repeated on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It goes out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He didn't say it's repeated on Thursday from being originated on Tuesday. Alas. Right. It did sound repetitious. It was going out so often. I quite agree.
I thought repeating.
It was a very repetitious thought, but he didn't actually repeat anything.
It sounded very boring, actually, too. It sounded rather worse even than the stuff he talks when he's on the air.
Actually, Peter, I wasn't bored. I was thinking of all the money I might be getting if it was true what he was saying.
No, I see, yes. Well, I wasn't thinking of that.
Oh, well, all right, then we'll get on with the game, shall we? 14 seconds, still with you, Clement. What I would say if I were not on the air, starting now.
Being tone dumb or unable to produce a note, if I were not on the air, I would not say so much, but sing. Nobody has ever heard me produce a note, and this is something which is very...
Peter Jones is challenged.
I've heard him produce a note. Crackle, crackle it went as it came out of this wallet.
One of those difficult decisions, because you've now twisted the whole thing, and I think he was quite clearly talking about musical notes, so I must give him a point and say there's half a second left. What I would say if I were not on the air for half a second, starting now.
Good evening.
Clement Freud's been doing a lot of talking just recently, and you will not be surprised to hear he's gained a lot of points, and he has a commanding lead at the end of that round. David Jacobs, will you begin the next round? The subject is mice. Will you go on that one for 60 seconds, starting now?
Mice are small rodents. They have 4 legs. You find them in various places, like cupboards where you keep food. If you see them there, they leave little calling cards.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation.
Yes.
They leave little calling cards whether you see them there or not.
But I think it would be perfectly true to say that if they saw you there, they'd be so frightened they'd leave a very big calling card. So whether they see you or not, they still leave calling cards, and probably more likely to if you see them there. So 47 seconds, still with you, David. Mice, starting now.
Small black pellets.
Derek Nimmo's chat.
Repetition of small.
Yes.
No, I said little. I said little, didn't say that small.
That's right.
Oh,
Yes, that's right. So Derek, wrong challenge, and David Jacobs keeps the subject, and there are 44...
rodents to begin with.
Yes, but that's too late now. There are 44 seconds left on mice, starting now.
Harvest mice, field mice, house mice. Mice being the plural of mouse. If you see several mice, you know that you are in trouble. Am I in trouble now? Very off-putting. Derek Nimmo was leaning round, staring at you. He was looking all mousy-eyed at me.
Yes. You were in real trouble, David.
I was in
the
terrible
audience
trouble.
knew it, you knew it, and Derek Nimmo knew it. He looked right at you because he's sitting beside you. Derek, you have the subject, 32 seconds, mice, starting now.
I'm absolutely plagued with mice at the moment. My house is ridden with them. And I, in one around the triangle, but I sometimes... and the little came, the old whiskers, go shut up, go off.
David Jacobs challenged you first.
You could have let rubbish and blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Hesitation.
I don't know what
Whatever
hesitation.
you like.
Yes, hesitation.
26 seconds, David, on mice, starting now.
My children used to keep white mice with little pink...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of little.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, this time it's right. 22 seconds, mice, Clement, starting now.
My children used to keep little white mice with small noses in cages which were fashioned of wood and wire and shavings, also sawdust, so that the mice...
Peter Jones has challenged.
The cage wasn't fashioned with sawdust. May have been filled with it, but it can't have been fashioned with it.
Well done, Peter. You have the subject. And there are 7 seconds for you on mice, starting now.
When I hear the word mice, my mind goes back to that great and good man, St. Martin, who befriended so many.
Peter was speaking when the whistle went, but I'm afraid he's still trailing a little, and Clement Freud's still in a commanding lead. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round? The subject is the local pub. I know you like to write them down. I'll give you time on this occasion. Local pub, 60 seconds, starting now.
The local pub is a tremendously English institution. There's nothing quite like it, I suppose, anywhere in the world. I have one very near to me called the Devonshire Arms, with a very jolly landlady of whom I know the most familiar terms, who greets me with open, outstretched limbs and thrusts them round my neck, gives me a great big kiss on my lips and fills me with excitement. I say, half a bit apiece.
What? Challenged.
That has got to be deviation.
Why?
Well, it'd be better than kissing the landlord, wouldn't it, anyway?
Why shouldn't the landlady kiss him on the lips and fill him with excitement? What's devious about that?
I thought it was the landlord.
I thought it was too.
But I thought the landlord was a woman. No, it doesn't matter. I don't think you deviate.
Well, you obviously go to the same kind of pub that he goes to.
I must say, if he treats all her customers like that, she must have a very exhausting life. 36 seconds on the local pub, Derek, starting now.
They have a dear slogan on the wall saying, please don't expectorate here, which I think is a charming way of dissuading one from doing something rather nasty. The floor is fashioned with sawdust because they put upon it...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Can't have a floor fashioned with sawdust.
They're feeding it into your hands, Peter. Well done. I quite agree.
I only put it in for his benefit.
I know.
Peter's trying to win the game on sawdust.
No, on fashion. There are 18 seconds, Peter, for you on the local pub starting now.
Well, the local pub, of course, is only local to the people living in the vicinity. To everybody else travelling from far away, it's an exciting new place to visit. And so the one that is just round the corner from you may be all too familiar to you, and the landlady may...
Well done, Peter. You fashioned your words well then, and you finished when the whistle went, got an extra point, and it's your turn to begin. The subject, quiet. Would you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now? Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Well, a rotten dumb and hesitation had to be, doesn't it, really?
Yes, it has.
I wasn't hesitating. I was just experiencing it. I wanted you to see what it was like, to be quiet for a moment or two. Then I was going to thank you very much.
And I think the audience feel, because of Peter's clever demonstration, he should keep the subject. Would you agree with that, audience?
Yes.
So I'm going to let him keep it and say there's 56 seconds on quiet, Peter, starting now.
I'd like to invite you all to a quiet evening. Just bring along pregnant silences. Don't have any drinks or food. Just sit around.
Peter Derek Nimmo challenged.
Peter Derek Nimmo challenged on the repetition of just.
Repetition of what?
Just.
Derek, you have a point for that challenge, and there are 46 seconds left. Quiet, starting now.
It's terribly difficult to play this game if the chairman is so quiet.
Peter Jones has challenged.
We know it's terribly difficult to play this game, and we don't want to hear any heart-rending story about it. We just want him to get on and talk about quiet.
So what is your challenge?
deviation. He's talking about what a difficult game this is to play.
Yes. So you have a...
Well, that's nothing to do with quiet.
But he didn't really have a chance to get underway, did he? All right, I'll give it back to you, because there are 23 seconds, Peter, with you on quiet starting now.
And if one could get quiet for long enough, one could perhaps...
David Jacobs,
Well, I think because he's being so silly, keep getting it back. He keeps saying one, doesn't he?
And could.
But he said could,
yes,
actually.
and could, yes.
One I wouldn't allow, but could you can have. 16 seconds on quiet with you, David, starting now.
It is in...
Derek Nimmo.
Sorry, hesitation.
Yes, all right, Derek. 14 seconds on quiet starting now.
I know the chairman prefers me to be quiet, but sometimes I must say a tiny word to the audience because they perhaps 1, 2, maybe even 3 might like to hear me utter very quietly, and so I sit here tiring.
Well, a very interesting situation at the end of the final round, at the end of the show. David Jacobs, returning to play again, did extraordinarily well because he finished in third place, equal with Peter Jones, who was the winner last time he was here, but they were only 4 points behind. Actually, I've just seen something. They were second because they were only 4 points behind our equal winners, Derek Nimmo and Clement Freud. We do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and will want to tune in again next time. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Cassells.
We present Clement Freud, Peter Jones, Warren Mitchell, and Jean Marsh in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute, and we're delighted to welcome back Warren Mitchell and Jean Marsh to play the game with Peter Jones and Clement Freud, who played it so often before. Once again, they're going to try and speak, if they can, on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card. And we'll begin the show this week with Clement Freud. And Clement, the subject that Ian Messiter thought of is cobber. Would you talk on cobber for 60 seconds, starting now?
Cobber is the sort of thing that nice people are called in Australia. You don't say, "Good morning, sir," "Good afternoon, gentlemen," or anything of that kind. Cobber suffices. Taxi drivers are hailed by that name. Bus conductors stop when you address them as... I'm sorry, I've said address before. I think somebody ought to buzz. I'll buzz myself.
Clement Freud, you've challenged yourself.
I repeated myself and being a totally honest
Well, you were
man.
listening extremely well, much better than everybody else, so you get a point for a correct challenge, and you keep... And there are 33 seconds left on cobber with you, starting now.
Does your mother take in washing? Has she sold her mangle? What's become of the old piano your sister used to strangle? Has your father plenty of work? Does he still get booze too? Tell me all the particulars and stop as long as you used to is a song which cobbers never sing because it's totally English and dates from the late 19th century music hall stage. In Australia...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of Australia.
Yes, you said that right at the beginning, I'm afraid, Clement, to cobber something to do with an Australian word. Don't look so
Australian.
mystified. You did say
Australian.
Australian. And Peter Jones has got a correct challenge.
The
and there are 10 seconds left
The
for you, Peter,
adjectival
on
form
cover,
of
starting
Australian.
now.
I have heard this word murmured, even shouted, occasionally in Earl's Court. And down the main road there in the evening on Saturdays with hot
The whistle tells us 60 seconds is up, and as you know, whoever is speaking at that particular moment gains an extra point. It was on this occasion Peter Jones, so he has the lead at the end of that round. And Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject, cereals. Would you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
Cereals. Well, yes, I think it's regrettable that they have more or less replaced bacon and eggs as the traditional English breakfast. I don't think they're nearly as nourishing or appetizing. There's no smell from them to come down to get you out of bed and into the dining room or breakfast room, as the case may be. And, of course,
Clement
they're
Freud has challenged. The buzzer didn't come on, but he did actually challenge.
Well,
Clement.
how is he doing it? Telepathy?
Would you press your buzzer a bit harder, Clement, see if it's working properly?
Perhaps he'd like a man to press the buzzer.
Yes, a runner.
A runner, yes. Clement, press it again, please, see if it's the buzzer's working.
It was a lukewarm challenge, which is why you saw it and didn't
Yes,
hear
well,
it.
the light came on, so I have to
It was
accept
repetition of room.
It was repetition of room, I'm afraid, yes. And your buzzer is working properly, so press it, and then the listeners particularly know that you've challenged, or anybody else. Clement, there are 37 seconds on cereals with you now, starting now.
One of my favorite cereals is called the Four Marys, and this is about that number of small
Jean
girls.
Marsh has challenged.
Petite hesitation,
Well,
but
I
as
would
he's
thought-
so experienced, I don't think he should do it at all.
Well, therefore, it wouldn't be petite with him, would it? It would be very definite. But still, Jean, I agree with the challenge. You have a point, and you have 29 seconds on cereals with you, starting now.
When I sit under the dryer at the hairdresser's, it's always my bad luck to get the matte weekly magazine and not the glossy monthly. But in that said article, there is usually a cereal. You do never need to read the actual story. All you need to do is...
Clement Freud has challenged.
I'm sorry.
On
Repetition of
need.
need.
You had too much need. You were needing too hard, Jean. And Clement has a correct challenge, another point, and 10 seconds for cereals, starting now.
Grape nuts are very hard to find these days.
Jean Marsh has challenged.
They're not at all. They're in every single shop in the high street.
Jean,
I hesitated about advertising, but you endorsed without any...
I didn't endorse. I've only endorsed the high street.
She has a correct challenge, and there are 5 seconds
They're
on
not
cereals.
moving, they're just in the high street. They can't get them across.
Yes.
5 seconds, Jean. Cereals starting now.
I don't like cereals because they're too noisy. All that snap, crackle, pop is far...
Jean was then speaking when the whistle went. She's moved into the lead alongside Clement Freud at the end of that round. Peter Jones, 1 point behind, and Warren Mitchell yet to score. Right, Jean Marsh is now going to begin the next round. The subject is the listeners. Would you talk about them, Jean, for 1 minute if you can, starting now?
I know quite a lot about them. I know them to be attractive, intelligent...
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
No, Nanette.
Yes. I can
Cut the nose in there.
And I have to accept the challenge because it was a correct one, and there are 55 seconds for you now.
She gets away with murder with that innocent look, doesn't she?
I know she does, but she's not getting away with it this time. So
No.
you've got the point, and you have 55 seconds on the listeners starting now.
The listeners. I'm very pleased to find as many...
Someone's pressed and no lights come on. Who's
Good.
done it
I'll
this
go
time?
on then. I'm delighted to find listeners wherever there are, because I'm a tremendous talker, at least
Yes.
not on this... Sorry,
no,
do you
you
want to
dry
say
up a lot.
something?
Yes, Jean Marsh actually challenged.
Was it? Oh, you found out?
I found out, yes.
It
She
was an
pressed too
extreme
down.
case of hesitation.
Vindictive thing, you, yes?
Yes. So
I'm
she's got
not
the sub...
vindictive. I'm fond of your work.
Not
Not fond of you, you notice, but fond of
lack
your work.
good taste, madam.
No, I'm
She
very
has the
fascinated.
subject back again with a legitimate challenge. So, Jean, you have 45 seconds for the listeners starting now.
I know a lot about them because I'm one myself.
Clement Freud has
The
challenged.
repetition of I know a lot about them.
Yes, that's who started last time,
Was
I'm
it?
afraid.
Mm.
Yes.
Oh, I do hope I don't start next time like that.
Well, you'll soon be pulled up if you do. Clement Freud, you have a point on the subject and 43 seconds on the listeners starting now.
The Listeners is the plural of The Listener, which is a magazine published by the British Broadcasting Corporation, who, and I had no idea of this until quite recently, are permitted to use anything which is said on the radio for a fee of 50% of that received when you spoke it.
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
Yes, it was a hesitation there.
Yes,
That's
it was.
true.
He
You
was
know, that's
searching for
true.
another way to express
Isn't that interesting?
It
I-
is. One of
Yes,
the
it
most
was
fascinating
interesting,
pieces
but
of
from the
you-
look on the audience's faces, I would have thought quite the reverse. So, Warren, I agree with your challenge, and you have a point, and of course, for the point, 23 seconds on the listeners starting now.
The idea of anyone paying 50% of what I am receiving for this program to publish these immortal words in that magazine published by the British...
Clement Freud has challenged.
I slowly deflate.
Yeah,
and
you
hand it
published a
over
bit
to
too
my
much, didn't
bearded
you?
friend.
Repetition
And
published.
so Clement has 12 seconds on the listeners starting now.
These are people who sit with their ears open, their eyes aghast, their mouth...
Someone's challenging him with that. It must be Eugene. Can you try that?
Yeah,
That's it, yes.
your eyes can't be aghast,
No,
and your ears
I-
are always open. I mean, you can't actually pin them. Well, you probably can. They're quite large. The average person can't.
I agree, Jean. You cannot
Why
apply that
can your
adjective
eyes
to
not be-
eyes. How do you make your eyes aghast?
This is radio.
How did Peter
Will you-
Gruff do a
will you-
ventriloquist act on
Will you-
radio all
will you
those
sit
years?
back very carefully now and watch?
All right. The listeners all have already been phoning in and saying we weren't aghast with our eyes. So Jean has a point, and she has 5 seconds on the listeners starting now.
At the beginning of the year, I was burgled and my television set was stolen, so thus I became one of the listeners. I had my radio on all the time.
Jean Marsh giving us a horrible admission of how she first started listening to radio, gained an extra point when the whistle went. But she has moved into the lead at the end of that round ahead of Clement Freud. Congratulations. Clement, your turn to begin. Ian Mester's thought of the subject of my stopcock for you. Would you talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
Some months ago, I was driving my car down a small country lane in Wales when I chanced to kill a rooster who had unfortunately projected himself beneath
Warren
the
Mitchell
front
has
axle.
challenged.
We can see the end of this tedious piece of spurious reasoning. I mean, you know, stopcock, really, but that's not the stopcock that he's referring to, my stopcock, is it?
You can interpret it in any way, providing it sounds accurate, according to what is said, not what is written. So what we'll do is we won't charge any points for that.
Because I haven't got any for you to take off.
You've got 2, actually.
Have I really? When did I get those?
Clement keeps the subject, and there are 47 seconds on my stopcock, starting now.
So feeling slightly guilty about this ravaging of livestock in rural countrysides, I stopped and went up to the farmhouse, and an awfully nice woman came out, and I said, look, I'm terribly sorry. I have run over your cockerel. Would you permit me to replace it? And she said, help yourself, the hen's around the back. I mention this simply to show that there are other endings than those that Warren Mitchell suggested when I began. A stopcock is the sort of thing you see in the street, in front of which you may not park your car. Otherwise...
Warren Mitchell has
That's
challenged.
totally untrue. I've never seen a stopcock in the street. I think you're thinking of a hose thing,
Yeah.
aren't you?
But they do have
hose
stopcock.
thing, of course. I meant to say hose thing.
Well, hose...
But I
How
think
silly
those,
of me.
I think those...
Fancy saying stopcock when you mean hose thing.
I'm glad you've learned something today, Clement.
Yeah. How to be sarcastic to people who haven't played the game very much.
It's all right.
I think
You
that...
can't insult me. I'm too ignorant.
I think the hose thing has a stopcock on it, actually.
Does it?
The thing in the
Well,
street.
yours might, mate, but I don't know about...
Well, I don't think actually he was deviating, so well tried. We'll give him a point for that and leave the subject with him. 10 seconds left, Clement, starting now.
With
you.
thou.
You've been challenged by Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yes.
I'll have half that point, please, Peter.
I couldn't leave the subject with anybody else because no one else has spoken about it except you, Clement. So I must allow Peter his challenge with 9 seconds to go. My stop clock, Peter, starting now.
The one we have at home is in a very inaccessible position. One has to stand on a box in order to get at it, and it's terribly stiff. One
Peter Jones gained the extra point and he has moved forward into third place. And Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject, long-distance calls. After you talking about the other week being cut off on your telephone, Ian thought of this one for you, and will you start now?
Well, long-distance calls don't necessarily mean on the telephone. In fact, nowadays it's very often much quicker to go there in person, particularly if it's in the Far East, Malaysia or New Zealand, somewhere of that kind. One can actually often fly there and get there ahead of the telephone call. Well, I don't seem that... it seems to me, anyway, that the other people have...
For a Mitchell's challenge.
Ah.
There's a minute.
I thought he'd nodded off.
Yes. I thought it was a slight hesitation.
A slight hesitation?
And we let one go, and he still stumbled and...
Warren, you got in with your challenge first. 34 seconds on the long-distance calls starting now.
Aunt Ethel, who lives in Homerton, was famous for her long-distance calls. She could stand in Mare Street, Hackney, and scream at the top of her voice, Charlie! Just like that, she would yell, or Fred! Or Harry! She had an enormous family. If they were over at Wanstead Flats, which they quite often were, on a Sunday morning, she could get, if she'd cooked lunch or tea or supper, she could quite often get them home simply by opening her enormous bouche or cake hole.
We were so enjoying it, we let you go past the 60 seconds, actually.
I was suffering agonies and torment.
I know, that's why we let it go. It was lovely to watch it. But once you opened your cake hole, then, of course, we couldn't resist it. Ian blew his whistle, and he told us that 70 seconds was up, and you had gained the extra point, and you have moved forward, but you are still in fourth place. 1 point behind Peter Jones, 2 behind Jean Marsh, and who's one behind Clement Freud. And Jean, will you begin the next round? The subject, what I get when I try. Would you what a devious subject. Yes, would you talk on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
What I get when I try, sometimes very tired, sometimes more than I bargained for. I find that I enjoy what I get when I don't try much more than what I get when I do try, because I'm so exhausted by the time I get it if I try.
Warren Mitchell has challenged.
Sometimes, twice. It went... I was going
3
to
or
let it go
4
by,
times.
but the audience were muttering and there was a kind of threat of a
revolution
amongst the
Well, I thought that was a very
peasants.
clever way of being sort of gallant and sporting. A challenge, her slip-up came right at the beginning, and he let it go until she'd had a good old bash for...
The only time he has been gallant and sporting. I
18
think
seconds.
Yeah.
And so you've got 42 left. What I get when I try, Warren, starting now.
I get nothing at all when I try. I find it better to relax and just let it all happen. Because tenseness, muscular tension, can be devastating to creative effort. And so when I make this attempt at hesitating...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Well, I thought there was a slight hesitation.
Right, there are 22 seconds for you, Peter, on what I get when I try, starting now.
What I get when I really try is that warm feeling of smugness that comes from knowing you've done your very best and spared nothing and no one. and I don't have it very often. It is an experience.
Clement Freud is challenged.
I just wanted to commiserate.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Is that another point to me?
Yes, because it's the wrong challenge, and you have 4 seconds left on what I get when I
hope in
try.
future you will get it more frequently.
Thank you very much.
4 seconds left, starting now.
And I'm going to do my very best this evening, if I possibly can.
Well, with generous feelings emanating from Clement Freud in that round, gaining Peter another point just before the whistle, another point on the whistle, he's moved forward equal with Clement Freud at the end of that round. Jean Marsh, 1 point behind. Warren, 3 points behind. Warren Mitchell, your turn to begin. The subject, keeping a bird. Well, we can take that many ways, and there are 60 seconds starting now.
Well, I'll take it in the purest and most innocent way possible. Johnny Spate, who you may have heard of, has a hobby. He keeps birds. He has a house full of birds, the two-legged feathered variety. He has a myna and a parrot, and he saw the same bird as I just mentioned in a shop window, and he went in and he stutters, so don't accuse me of hesitation. He went into this shop and he said, ha, 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 ha.
Repetition.
Well, as he warned you the stutter was coming up, I think it was a very ungentlemanly challenge.
No, he warned us that we should not treat it as hesitation.
Yes, yes.
Warren, we'll hear the rest of the story, but be careful. 32 seconds on keeping a bird starting now.
He went into the shop and said, how much is that parrot in the window? And the bloke, who was the proprietor, said, it's £600, sir. And Johnny Spate said, that's a lot of money for one of them birds there. And this, he said, for so much gelt, can that creature up there to talk? And the bloke in the shop said, a jolly sight better than you, sir.
Well, you hardly played just a minute when you were telling the story, but the audience obviously enjoyed it so much it was worth having it. And if you're listening, Johnny Spate, what do you
get
think
well soon.
And all our love to the birds. Lisbon is the subject, Clement.
We'll
talk about it. 60 seconds, starting now.
Lisbon is the capital city of Portugal and contains one of the very best restaurants in which I've ever been, a place which has on its menu smoked swordfish, which is a fantastic delicacy, light pink in color, having some of the elegance of salmon, tainted with a little eel, and served with black pepper, lemon juice, and whipped cream.
Warren Mitchell's challenge.
I'm getting so hungry sitting there. Could I send out for a salt beef sandwich while this is going on?
So, what's your challenge?
No challenge, my tummy's rumbling, that's all. I haven't had time for dinner yet. I'll sacrifice the point. It was a wrong challenge, but I had to say
You
it's
could
cruel.
try deviation because he's concentrating on this one single meal in one restaurant.
So let us charge nothing, because Warren's hunger overcame him.
That's
Leave
right.
the subject with Clement, who has 33 seconds on Lisbon, starting now.
But I don't want to confine myself to one meal in one restaurant in Lisbon. There is a coach museum on the outskirts of the city where the most beautiful Victorian handsome...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of city.
Here, here.
Yes. All right, Peter, you have 22 seconds on Lisbon, starting now.
Well, I've never been to Lisbon and know very little about it. But if I can possibly avoid it, it's not going to stop me from talking about it for at least 20 minutes if I have an opportunity to do so without repeating myself or deviating or, in fact, wandering off this fascinating subject. Because it was founded, you may not realize this, many years ago.
So, Peter, you kept going magnificently, and you've taken the lead at the end of that round. And you begin the next round. The subject, what I dig. 60 seconds starting now.
What I dig is not very much. Nothing like the acres that people till when they are cultivating agriculturally or even in their gardens. But a little window box or even pot indoors is enough for me. I just turn the soil over with a small ladylike spade or even a fork, possibly even
Clement Freud is challenged.
There's too much even tilling of the soil.
Couldn't think of anything else to turn his soil over with. 34 seconds are left for What I Dig, Clement, with you starting now.
What I dig is an Australian mating call, which you are likely to hear from Perth to Brisbane, not including Sydney, Melbourne, and the outskirts of such suburban areas which I've previously mentioned. What I dig, they say, which is like cobber, a subject which I remember talking about some months ago without much success. What I dig personally is red hair and green eyes. I simply cannot get enough. Pasty faces, ideally.
I'm afraid we have no more time to play Just a Minute, so let me tell you the final score, which was that Warren Mitchell, returning from his former triumphs, yes, you remember last time he finished a magnificent fourth. This time he finished a stupendous third, alongside Jean Marsh.
And we're better.
And we're better, yes. Actually, whether they were in third place or second place is according to the way you look at these sort of results, but they were equal, I would say, in second place, behind two equal winners this week, Peter Jones and Clement Freud. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Castles.